This guy is a cheap knockoff of the former #1 hunter, and he's about to beat the record that the former #1 hunter set, a record that nobody has ever beaten before in front of tens of thousands of people watching him. That record is to defeat the strongest mecha robot in under 3 minutes. But little did everyone know, he is actually the former #1 hunter who came back. You see, this man was once recognized as the strongest player, but while raiding the Tower of Heaven, he was personally betrayed by his allies. At death's door, he exhausted the last of his strength to send his companions out. Then, while still fully conscious, he clearly sensed it, he had died. His name was Narukami, the guild master of the strongest guild, Blue Eyes. On that day, the strongest guilds had gathered together to raid the Tower of Heaven. During the battle, the Blue Eyes Guild performed especially brilliantly. Years of climbing the tower side by side had made their coordination nearly flawless. But just then, the support unit in the rear was suddenly ambushed. Narukami instantly realized something was wrong, but it was already too late. He had long since been poisoned by hydrovenom, and the members of Blue Eyes were also focused on defeating the dungeon boss, the Sea Dragon, Hydra. Seizing the opportunity, the allied guilds had teamed up and betrayed them. At death's door, he exhausted the last of his strength to send his companions out. To buy them time, he sacrificed his own life and fought the allied guilds alone. But unfortunately, Narukami's fatigue had already reached 100. Pitch black, but sensation was returning to his limbs. He abruptly pushed himself up, and the lid above his head fell to the ground with a clang. Only then did he see clearly that he was actually lying inside a garbage bin. He instinctively checked his status after reviving from death in an unfamiliar environment. The first thing he had to do was confirm his status panel. He did not care at all about 61 points of fatigue. What was truly glaring were the shabby, laughable level and attributes. Every skill he had fought desperately to obtain was gone. Just then, a tearing headache exploded in his mind, and Narukami frowned in pain. But the memories that surfaced in the next second no longer belonged to Narukami. They belonged to the original owner of this body. The original owner had lost both parents in childhood and was a beggar avoided by everyone on the streets. Not only could he never eat his fill, but because he had the same name as the blue-eyed hero Narukami of the district, he was cursed and beaten every day. And what chilled him most was this: the 20 years since his death had already passed. The garbage bin lid lying on the ground reflected his face. Black hair, gentle features, and still the youthful face of a young man. For a moment, he could not make sense of what had happened and could only force himself to climb out of the garbage bin. But because he had not yet adapted to this body, he fell down as soon as he crawled out. At that moment, a player kit lying on the ground came into view. Narukami reached out and picked it up, thinking it had probably slipped out of the original owner's pocket before he was stuffed into the garbage bin. Although the style was completely different from the one he had used in the past, with the support of the original owner's memories, he skillfully searched for information related to Blue Eyes. The moment he pressed confirm, a flood of news poured out. Narukami quickly skimmed through it all. Yet among every report, he could not find any news of survival from the companions he had sent away. Just then, Narukami's gaze suddenly froze, staring fixedly at the image on the screen. Itsuki, that bastard, was actually still alive. In truth, Narukami's relationship with him had not been bad. It had even been very good. Teammates who climbed the tower and risked their lives together could hardly avoid seeing each other as friends. Or at least that was what Narukami had always believed. But back then, Itsuki had suddenly proposed leaving Blue Eyes without explaining his reasons. Before leaving, Itsuki told Narukami not to worry, saying that even if he left, he would still become his shadow. A few years later, Itsuki founded the Blue Zone Guild, the very shadow he had spoken of. After sorting out his thoughts, Narukami wandered the streets aimlessly. He had thought that after 20 years, the Tower of Heaven would at least have been conquered up to the 10th floor, yet it was still stuck on the 9th. Suddenly, he looked up and drew in a sharp breath. He was standing inside a memorial hall. Aside from himself, almost everyone was wearing a mask identical to blue-eyed Narukami's. The hall was filled with photos, objects, and footage related to Narukami, but he only gave them a rough glance before looking away. As he walked deeper into the memorial hall, one thing caught his eye more than any exhibit. He saw his memorial portrait piled high with flowers. There were actually this many people who remembered him. But on second thought, was this a carefully staged performance? A show put on to steal Blue Eyes' achievements? Just then, from within the layers of bouquets, Narukami sensed a familiar magic power. Focusing his eyes, he saw that hidden among the chrysanthemums was a transparent ice flower, so unreal it hardly seemed real. He immediately pushed through the crowd and rushed forward. The visitors lined up around him were shoved aside and cursed loudly, but he no longer cared. Very quickly, Narukami reached the pile of flowers and reached out impatiently. The moment his fingertips touched the flower, a bone-piercing chill crawled up along his skin. The instant he grasped it, his whole body went rigid. This was a chrysanthemum carved from ice, and he knew all too well that this was absolutely Shu's handiwork. A figure stood atop the clock tower, overlooking the memorial hall. The old man looked down at the hall as if confirming that this year too would pass without incident. Behind him, the woman in a robe spoke up, agreeing and adding that if they had been any later, they probably would have already started fighting with those people from Blue Zone. But she questioned whether he really had to send that kind of thing, wondering if an ordinary chrysanthemum would not have been enough. The old man slowly removed his hat, the corner of his mouth lifting as he chuckled softly. He mused that maybe if that guy came back alive, he would see the flower he had left behind. In the next second, the old man's aged face cracked apart like splitting skin, revealing the face of a young man. He was none other than Azuji Shu, the Blue Eyes member rumored to have died many years ago. The woman could not help but ask whether he still thought Narukami was alive. Azuji Shu replied calmly that after all, he had never seen the body with his own eyes, and so every year on this day, he came here. The woman could only remind him that the problem was they still had not found him, and that Itsuki might discover their location even faster. But Azuji Shu acted as if he had not heard and walked straight past her. Watching his resolute back, the woman suddenly cried out that if that guy were really still alive, they would not be hiding like this. In her heart she sighed. It seemed that this year too, she had failed to talk that guy out of it. Soon the sky darkened into sunset. Narukami had already spent several hours searching around the memorial hall, but he still never managed to see Azuji Shu. He could only note that Isaac Reinhardt's son possessed talent that surpassed even his bloodline and had only stopped challenging after defeating more than 20 goblins in total. Kowen could not help sneering. He muttered that this year's tutorial was too easy, and that kids these days were truly pathetic. But when he caught sight of the next contestant's name, he still paused slightly in surprise. It was a name known by everyone, one that even Hugo himself had once idolized. Faced with this contestant, his first reaction was not anticipation but weariness. He sighed inwardly. This child would probably suffer endlessly because of that name. Everywhere he went, he would be compared to Narukami. Even the weapon in his hand was the sword Narukami commonly used. Of course, that was only if he passed the trial first. Immediately after, a message popped up before Narukami's eyes. 2 goblins were being generated. He was prompted to defeat the goblins. The goblins held poison-coated spikes in their hands, letting out shrill cries like monkeys. At the same moment the goblins assumed their attacking stances, Hugo announced the start. But in that very instant, Narukami had already shot forward through the air. With a flash of cold light as the blade cut through the air, 2 heads fell at the same time. In the blink of an eye, the goblins' heads were tumbling in midair. Kowen could not believe his own eyes and stared in shock. He immediately turned his head to look at the boy who shared Narukami's name. During the 2 days before the tutorial began, Narukami had constantly been adapting to this body. Judging only by the attributes, the original owner really did have talent. He had just never truly brought it out before. The message to challenge the next stage popped up before Narukami's eyes, and as though he had been waiting for exactly this, he selected continue without the slightest hesitation. Before long, Hugo was completely rooted in place by the scene before him. A goblin's head rolled weakly to his feet. He had originally still been counting the number of corpses, but soon gave up trying. By rights, the goblin corpses should only disappear once Narukami's battle ended. But the battle never ended, and the corpses kept piling higher and higher until there was almost nowhere left to step in the trial arena. Hugo stared fixedly at Narukami's every movement, afraid of missing even a single instant. This was absolutely the most terrifyingly gifted boy he had ever seen in his life. Narukami was not just swinging his sword casually. He was seeing through the situation 2 steps, 3 steps ahead in advance. This was already beyond something that could be summed up as merely good at fighting. Even Hugo himself could not achieve that level of bodily control. Narukami was not like Isaac, able to use magic, and his physical abilities did not appear especially exaggerated either. Yet, even when facing 50 goblins, he still fought with an overwhelming presence. Hugo felt his scalp go numb and nearly lost his voice. He wondered whether this kid could really be Narukami reincarnated, and how exactly he was moving like that. Before long, Narukami dealt with the last goblin as well. A new message appeared before his eyes. Stage 49 had ended. He was prompted to challenge the final boss, with a notice that clearing a higher stage would grant the corresponding additional reward. Stage 50 was the final stage of the beginner tutorial. But Narukami did not hesitate for even a second and directly chose to continue the challenge. The Goblin King's entire body stiffened and it halted in panic, staring fixedly at Narukami while Narukami bent over and searched through the pile of goblin corpses. In the next second, he was gripping several poison needles in his hand. He spoke calmly yet with full pressure, proposing a bet on what would happen next, whether the Goblin King would catch him first, or whether it would turn into a pincushion first. As the words fell, Narukami violently threw 2 goblin poison needles. The poison needles tore through the air like sharp arrows and accurately buried themselves in the Goblin King's 2 eyes. The Goblin King covered its eyes with both hands and let out a scream. It swung its giant hammer around wildly, but all of it was futile. A Goblin King with a crippled leg and blinded eyes had no chance of catching Narukami, who could control the distance with perfect precision. Narukami skillfully widened the gap again and once more slipped the poison needles he had picked up from the corpse pile between his fingers. He could not help recalling the days when he had practiced throwing knives with bitter effort. When he had first started, the throwing knives he cast had almost always missed the target. Back then, Raina happened to pass by and saw him practicing knife throwing. By coincidence, she was an expert in throwing concealed weapons, and on the spot, she insisted on teaching him the technique. She took her stance, casually picked up a pen, and in the next second threw it straight through the bullseye. As Miranda forged from mithril with more than enough strength and sharpness, and even its added effects suited Narukami well. But for this holy sword named Miranda, Narukami found himself strangely unable to feel interested. Perhaps because the equipment he had once used had simply been too powerful. How to spend these points was a brand new starting point, and he had to be cautious. At that moment, a skill entry caught Narukami's eye. The farther back he flipped, the more expensive the skills became. But when he turned to the next page, the first thing that appeared was actually a skill rated F rank. Narukami had never seen a skill like this before, and thought it might suppress the side effects brought by the demonic blade or his lightning skill. Since he saw a possibility, he purchased it without hesitation. In the end, he bought the unnamed demonic blade and the Wedge of Greed. This skill had extremely high compatibility with the demonic sword. Rather than letting the skill sit unused, it was better to make it show its value from the very start. Sensing that Narukami had already finished choosing his rewards, Hugo walked up behind him. From Hugo's point of view, the skill and item Narukami had chosen were both hard to understand, and he could not help asking why Narukami had chosen that kind of skill, noting that not only might it prove useless, but its efficiency was not high either. But Narukami frowned and replied, questioning why he should tell him anything. Hugo's temper flared at his blunt response, and he demanded to know what Narukami meant by that, but very soon he suppressed his emotions again, standing in Narukami's shoes. Such weariness was normal too. Staring at Hugo, Narukami suddenly recalled how when he had first confirmed that the man was the examiner, he had almost failed to control his expression. Because the first time he had met Hugo, the other man had still been an apprentice knight of the Knights Guild. During that meeting between the Night Nation and Blue Eyes, the youthful Hugo had once walked up to Narukami with a flushed face and asked for his autograph. He had stiffly held out the paper, his stare so direct that the pressure from it had been absurdly strong. Narukami had never imagined that the sniveling brat from back then would now sit in the position of examiner for the beginner tutorial, while he himself had become a novice who had just stepped into the tower. Fipel, helpless. Narukami interrupted Hugo's lecture. He stated that he would explain nothing, only asking that Hugo absolutely keep the tutorial results secret. But Hugo put on the airs of an elder and continued lecturing, insisting that since Narukami was acting like that, he obviously lacked proper upbringing, and declared he would teach him properly from the beginning. Narukami turned his head and walked away. Seeing this, Hugo immediately changed tack and extended an olive branch, asking whether Narukami was interested in joining the Knights Guild. Without even turning his head, Narukami merely declined. Stepping into the noisy marketplace, Narukami stood quietly in place, watching the streets full of people coming and going. Reaching the second floor carried extraordinary meaning for players. It not only meant passing the beginner tutorial, but also meant truly taking the first step into battle as a player. But for Narukami, that meaning weighed on him like shackles, because he had already walked this path once, and this time he had to do better, for the sake of the teammates who might still be waiting for him, and also to avenge the cruel end everyone had suffered. After that, Narukami went to the central district and rented a private training room. This was also a place many novice hunters often came to. The owner asked casually what floor Narukami had come from. Narukami told him he had just come up from the first floor. The owner suggested that he use training room number 1, which had complete basic facilities like straw dummies and practice mannequins. But Narukami felt number 1 was too basic and not suitable for him, so he directly chose number 5. The owner got a little annoyed when he heard that. He remarked that he had kindly advised Narukami to choose number 1, and that Narukami did not even appreciate it. But Narukami insisted on number 5, so in the end the owner still gave it to him, reminding him that there would be no refund if he left halfway through. Narukami told him not to worry, though he added that in a moment the owner might need to pay a little more attention to that room. The higher the room number, the greater the difficulty, and some hunters had even died in their own training rooms. After arriving at training room number 5, Narukami slowly pushed open the door. The moment he entered, he immediately began training. He had no intention of wasting even a second. He slowly drew the demonic sword from his waist. In an instant, a powerful curse swept through his entire body. He could feel how terrifying the sword was. If he did not want to be devoured by it, then he could only keep growing stronger. In the next moment, the sword's corrosion suddenly intensified, and he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. He had not expected this body to reach its limit so quickly, but all of this was within his expectations. This body had been weak to begin with. A system prompt sounded. Wedge of Greed is resisting the demonic sword. Partial resistance successful. In the next second, he was not disgust but fear. He raised his head. He stated that he had only just arrived, and questioned what they wanted with him. But when he spoke, his fingers were still trembling slightly. The man sat down beside him as if nothing was wrong. He remarked with amusement that even trash like Narukami had managed to pass the hunter exam, and that he had expected the goblins to have torn him apart long ago. The moment he heard that, Narukami's temper flared, and he also remembered who this person was. His name was Isaac, and he had always bullied the former Narukami. The reason was simple, because he had the same name as the Narukami from 20 years ago. No matter how the original owner begged, Isaac had never once stopped, and because of that, the original owner had feared him down to his bones. Narukami cursed inwardly, pitying the original owner for having been bullied like that without ever fighting back. But right now, he had no time to waste on Isaac. After downing a cup of coffee, he stood up to leave. Isaac gave a chuckle and told Narukami to buy him another cup. Narukami stood up directly. He told Isaac that if he wanted a drink, he could pay for it himself, since his hands were not broken and his legs were not crippled. Those words completely set Isaac off. He demanded to know who had possessed Narukami to make him dare talk like that. Narukami could not even be bothered to look at him and kept turning to leave. It was not that he did not want to avenge the original owner. He simply had more important things to do right now. But at that moment, Isaac grabbed his arm with a threatening smile, asking whether Narukami wanted to see what happened to trash that tried to run. Narukami's eyes instantly turned cold. He advised Isaac to let go, warning him it was for his own good, and that ending up with a broken arm or a shattered leg would be perfectly normal otherwise. The moment those words fell, everyone in the coffee shop looked over. Isaac's face turned ashen. He warned Narukami not to get too full of himself. She also knew he could not make a scene in front of so many people or he would be the one at a disadvantage. He gave 2 dry laughs, remarking that Narukami's temper had grown lately, and that he could no longer take a joke, telling him to go do whatever he needed to do. But then he revealed a vicious look in his eyes. He warned that Narukami had better hope he never caught him at a disadvantage, or he would kill him. After throwing out that line, Isaac left while pretending nothing had happened. What he did not know was that this threat had already started the countdown on his own life. There were mainly 2 paths for a hunter's growth. The first was trials, obtaining rich rewards through the tower's trials. The second was hunting, going outside the safe zone to kill monsters or clearing the special dungeons on each floor to grind experience. But if you died there, then you were truly dead. And Narukami chose to grow through hunting. Today he had just dealt with a goblin and earned a few gold coins, which already counted as a decent bit of income. Back then he had climbed upward step by step precisely that way. More ironically, the other party was actually streaming with the mask and name Narukami had used in the past. In just a few short minutes, that person earned 20,000 credit points. The viewers threw gifts like they had gone mad. Narukami was so angry that even his fingers trembled. He might hunt for a whole year and still not earn as much as someone else made in a single stream. He knew he could not keep walking the old path. He had to go with the trend and start streaming, because only then could he really build up money. What was more, they were all imitating him, so if he, the real one, imitated himself, what kind of effect would that have? Thinking of that, Narukami slowly stood up. He made up his mind, deciding he would go activate streaming access that very night, but that the most urgent thing right now was to clear out all the monsters on this floor first. Very soon 4 or 5 goblins appeared in front of him, every one of them hideous, but there was not the slightest fluctuation in Narukami's gaze. After the demonic sword's corrosion had been suppressed, the power inside his body began to flow smoothly. He entered the second floor trial at the same time, the objective being to clear the dungeon monsters and find the exit. From time to time he glanced at the viewer count, but after more than 10 minutes had passed, only 2 people had entered. From the way he was operating, the viewers could already tell it looked like his first time climbing the tower. Narukami confirmed that it really was his first time, which only made them more worried. If it was his first time, he might not even know the way. As he walked, a shadow appeared ahead of Narukami. A bat monster tried to ambush him while he was reading the chat. Without even lifting his head, Narukami grabbed it directly by the skull, exerted force with his right arm and smashed it viciously into the ground. He muttered that it was his first time streaming and questioned whether the bat had a death wish. After the bat monster was smashed to death, he immediately gained 1 credit point. He then replied to the chat, acknowledging it was his first time in there but assuring them there would be no problem. Very soon, he stepped into the entrance of the second floor trial. At this moment, the audience in his stream had risen to 3. Someone said he was too reckless, noting that very few people started streaming as early as the second floor. The viewers advised him not to be too greedy and said it would be safer to form a party. He thanked them for the suggestion but refused directly, reasoning that forming a party would only slow down his monster-killing speed. Seeing how fearless he was, someone laughed. Others supported him, noting that anyone who borrowed Narukami's name could become popular quickly. With a whoosh, Narukami's figure instantly vanished from where he stood. While running, he drew the blade at his waist. With 1 slash, the small monster in front of him was decapitated on the spot. This scene left the viewers dumbfounded. They had not even seen the path of his blade clearly. Very soon, a large swarm of bats surged out in front of him, but those bats could not even get close to him. With 1 horizontal sweep of his sword, more than 10 were cut down on the spot. The viewer count rose to over 10. As he killed them, he also gained several achievement points. He even casually advised the viewers to focus and listen to the sound, explaining that doing so would allow them to judge which direction the enemies were lunging from. In just a few minutes, the bat monsters in the area had been wiped out. The viewers exploded. They accused him of having lied, insisting he was no beginner at all. Narukami pressed on, gathering as many points as possible before leaving. Very soon, someone noticed that something was off. He had almost been walking in a straight line the whole time. Narukami explained that it was his first time in there and his first time streaming, so he was not very familiar. As he walked, he felt the density of the monsters ahead was wrong. He looked up and saw the wall covered with a dense mass of bats. In the next second, all those bats opened their eyes at the same time. The chat instantly flooded with people declaring he was done for. One wealthy viewer even directly posted a task: defeat all the bats for a reward of 100 points. The moment Narukami saw that task, his eyes lit up. He had spent all day the previous day for only a few dozen points, and now a single reward was 100. Some people started mocking him, warning him not to fall for the bait and insisting it was not worth dying for 100 points. But Narukami's next sentence directly set the stream ablaze. He thanked them for the extra 100 points. Inside the guild, a huge hand slammed hard onto the table. Wita's partner was on the verge of collapse. He had just taken a liking to a new streamer who had made it safely all the way to the 6th floor, only to suddenly quit, making all the donation money from before go completely to waste. Only then did he realize that Wita was still beside him, and he quickly apologized. He admitted he had been too loud. A viewer remarked that being on the 4th floor and getting taught by a 2nd floor beginner felt like being told that as long as you moved your legs, you could walk. Narukami sheathed his blade and only felt that communicating with them was far too exhausting. Someone reminded him not to forget to claim the points. If the chat had not reminded him, he really might have forgotten. He picked up his phone and prepared to claim the points. But once he opened the phone, he did not know what to tap and awkwardly paused for a second. The viewers got anxious, urging him to hurry up and claim them. Narukami felt a little embarrassed. He admitted it was his first time streaming and that he was not very good at claiming points. The whole chat immediately lost it. He really was a newcomer. Following the chat's step-by-step instructions, he finally managed to claim them successfully. After finishing that, he continued toward the next area, which was also the final section of this floor. At this point, he had 150 points in hand and 37 achievement points. A sudden scream rang out inside the streaming guild building. Weewa used only one word to describe this new streamer: insane. She declared that the person was definitely Narukami reincarnated and that they had to pull him into the guild. Her partner looked speechless, questioning why someone that strong would ever look at them. The moment Narukami was mentioned, she always lost control. Weewa already looked as if she had fallen into it completely. She murmured that her head felt dizzy and wondered if this was what youth felt like. Her partner suddenly shouted, demanding to know whether she was seriously thinking of recruiting that guy. Weewa said outright that she was going to recruit him, asking whether he disagreed. Her partner explained. He acknowledged that Narukami was a little special, but pointed out that he was just a newcomer who had only just started and had no viewers, and therefore did not meet their recruitment standards. Of course, Weewa understood the rules, but she still intended to recruit him. She trusted her own judgment. She had never misjudged someone. She did not say it out loud, but she was almost certain this person was the genuine Narukami. Only his appearance and form had changed, but that oppressive presence and that combat rhythm were almost exactly the same. At that moment, Narukami arrived before a massive door. This should be the end of the dungeon. Once he crossed it, he could go to the next floor. With a slight push of his hand, the great door opened. Inside, sure enough, there was a big one. As the door opened, a werewolf was sitting inside. It was Greg the Wolf Warrior, an extremely terrifying opponent, especially because of his one-hit kill attack power. The livestream immediately warned Narukami that the Wolf Warrior was absurdly strong, and that some people had been stuck there 8 times before finally clearing it. The system also issued a notification. As long as he earned the Wolf Warrior's approval, he could pass through the gate and enter the trial. Someone in the chat was shocked, remarking that they had never seen a mode like that before. Even Narukami had never encountered a situation like this in his previous life, but he stated that since he was there, his target was the Wolf Warrior himself. The Wolf Warrior paused, asking whether his target should not be the door behind him. Narukami replied that he wanted both, and added that someone in his stream had spent 3,000 credit points asking him to kill the Wolf Warrior. The Wolf Warrior nodded, remarking that it was as expected of a man carrying the soul of a great powerhouse. At the same time, in the streaming guild building, Weewa and her partner had gone to see their superior. Sitting across from them was John Tail, head of Azure Sky Entertainment's department. He asked how many viewers this new streamer they were talking about had. Her partner looked a little awkward. He said around 20, but Weewa corrected him with certainty, saying it was already 30. She felt absolutely no shame over that number. The supervisor frowned. He pointed out that they had come running to him over 20 or 30 viewers, noted that he had seen them gambling during work hours, and said that when he told them to find someone with potential, they had brought him someone with only 20 viewers. Weewa corrected him directly. It was 30. The supervisor was speechless, telling them not to get hung up on meaningless details. Weewa twisted the knife further, mentioning that she had just sneaked another look and it was already over 40, and that the growth rate was pretty fast. That sentence made the supervisor flare up. He demanded to know whether she had heard a word he said. Meanwhile, Narukami and the Wolf Warrior were also preparing to fight. The Wolf Warrior's aura erupted. He declared that Narukami was dreaming if he wanted his life. Narukami judged that meeting him head-on was a little disadvantageous. Narukami's figure slid off to the side, narrowly avoiding the swing. The Wolf Warrior stated that as Narukami was, he was still no match for him, and called him too arrogant for thinking he could land a kill. But at this moment, Narukami's charge-up was already complete. In the next instant, he brought his sword down and collided head-on with the Wolf Warrior, and the cave exploded with a harsh metallic screech. The livestream watched while shaking their heads, insisting that if all he could do was defend, there was no way he could beat the Wolf Warrior, and that reality was just that cruel. After that exchange, Narukami had been blasted into the wall by the Wolf Warrior, yet he had not suffered too serious an injury. The Wolf Warrior remarked smugly that Narukami was not truly strong, but that he had been pleased and declared he was willing to call him a warrior. In the next second, he spread his claws and killing intent descended. He announced it was time to end things, and told Narukami that when he came again next time, he would be waiting to be defeated. When that claw came down, the wall behind Narukami was smashed to pieces on the spot. But Narukami dodged that attack with only the smallest movement. He replied that the line was supposed to be his, and that the Wolf Warrior's attacks were too easy to read, that anyone just a little faster could dodge them. In the next second, Narukami reversed his sword and ripped open a blood-soaked wound on the Wolf Warrior's chest, so deep that bone could be seen. One sword strike fell. Even if the wolf warrior was strong, he could not block this full power blow. Before dying, the wolf warrior murmured that Narukami was excellent and truly a warrior. The moment he defeated the wolf warrior, Narukami's level and every attribute rose across the board and he obtained 500 achievement points. But he also paid a price. His injuries were not light. The live stream exploded completely. Viewers declared that the wolf warrior had never been killed before, and that he had actually died in this guy's hands. Narukami let out a long breath. Fighting to this extent with this body really was exhausting. At the same time, the viewers had risen to 56, and the popularity was still climbing. With the task completed, he received 3,000 credit points. He had not expected that in just one day he would earn more credit points than he used to make in an entire month. He would use every bit of these assets to grow stronger. After the wolf warrior fell, the door behind him opened automatically. At that moment, a new notification popped up on the panel. Even the viewers in the stream were dumbfounded. The system had actually offered two paths. On the left was the elemental trial, and on the right was the laws of nature. For a total of 13 choices combined, more than 50 viewers were stunned on the spot, and some checked the records. Ordinarily, at most only 16 would ever appear. Narukami chose to challenge the Trial of Thunder, because in his previous life that was the path he had taken, and it was exactly what the chat had wanted to suggest. This path was the most valuable but also the hardest. Narukami confirmed without hesitation, Trial of Thunder. In the next second, his figure vanished from the second floor. The people in the guild building saw this scene as well. Everyone grew excited after the wolf warrior was killed. They marveled that he had still dared choose the Trial of Thunder. Weio immediately pressed the point to the supervisor. She asked whether he had ever seen someone hit 60 viewers on the first day of streaming, and pointed out that while people usually only triggered 2 or 3 tasks at most, he had triggered 13, asking whether that was not the mark of a genius. The supervisor had no choice but to admit it. The supervisor smiled, asking whether even if Narukami passed the preliminaries, they really thought he had a chance. Up to that point, the only hunter who had ever learned thunder magic was Narukami himself. Weio decided to use provocation to force the issue, asking outright whether he dared to bet or not. Of course the supervisor dared. With a 99% chance of winning, why would he not? The one suffering most was the partner, whose mouth Weio covered with one hand as she forcibly staked 5 years of his salary as well. At this moment, the thunder judgment was about to begin. Narukami's figure was teleported onto a battlefield. He was just about to sweep his eyes over his surroundings when human voices suddenly rang in his ears. He turned his head and a burly man rushed over and grabbed him tightly. As the burly man tackled Narukami to the ground, a huge explosion sounded behind them. When Narukami looked up, he saw a white-skinned bald giant, absurdly huge. The man beside him roared, demanding to know what Narukami was standing around for and whether he wanted to die. Very soon, Narukami received the system task, defeat the Titan fragment. He could not understand why that thing would spawn there. At the same time, the giant overhead raised the massive hammer in its hand and smashed it viciously toward him. Narukami was still in shock and reacted half a beat too slowly. Even the livestream was confused, questioning what was going on and pointing out that since it was the Trial of Thunder, that monster should be in the Titan chapter instead. Narukami was equally surprised. Boss-class monsters were supposed to appear only in the latter half of the trial, so how had he run into one on the second floor? The giant did not care whether he was dazed or not. Its weapon came crashing down directly, but at the very instant it fell, Narukami had already left his original spot. Judging from the rhythm of that strike, it did not seem as strong as he remembered. If this thing was only at that level, Narukami was confident he could clear it. The man behind him was still shouting, insisting that he had not saved Narukami just to watch him get himself killed. Narukami slowly drew the blade at his waist. This had to be ended quickly so he would not be held back by other people. At the same time, the unnamed demonic blade began devouring his stamina, raising all attributes according to the amount consumed, while the wedge of greed forcibly suppressed the backlash of the demonic sword. In the next second, the boss closed in right before him, and Narukami's attack was already prepared. His figure flashed and shot straight forward, pushing his speed to the limit. The white giant's expression froze. It had not expected Narukami to be able to jump that high. Narukami landed behind it and seized its head in one grip. The blade stabbed directly into the back of its neck. That was its weak point, and damage there was doubled, just as he had judged. With a single strike, he pierced straight through the white giant's throat. Immediately after, Narukami leveled up. Strength and agility each increased by 2, while HP and mana also rose significantly. His achievement points also neared 400. Killing that giant had not been for nothing. Besides that, he also obtained the giant's heart and thunder armor. The big guy beside him looked like his jaw was about to drop, and the livestream exploded the same way. Viewers marveled that the system had handed out all the rewards for the stage in one go. The big man jogged over, stuttering in disbelief that Narukami had actually killed the white giant. The chat burst into laughter, remarking that if they were natives, they would probably be scared stupid too. Narukami nodded. He stated that killing it was not hard, and declared himself their savior, specially sent to kill giants. The chat laughed even harder, with viewers saying that explanation sounded exactly like classic nonsense. After that, the big man brought Narukami back to the village to rest. The village was not large, but it was peaceful for the moment. At least no white monsters were attacking. Narukami found a place to stay and began checking the system storage. The viewers were unbearably curious and kept urging him to open the storage so they could see the loot. Narukami was curious too, so he reached into the storage interface. A system prompt appeared. One giant heart accessory had been obtained. It could increase HP and recovery ability, and its appearance was a finely crafted ring. Accessories were already rare to begin with, and this kind of vitality boost was practically perfect. But what Narukami wanted most was that armor. In addition to defense +5, it allowed the use of Thunder Strike and granted immunity to status ailments, but it could only be used 3 times. The chat was completely stunned, with viewers declaring that Thunder armor could actually drop, and that the giant heart alone was a permanent item valuable enough to be priced however one wanted. In the next moment, Narukami put on the Thunder armor and the aura around his whole body changed. Someone in the chat posted a task. They promised 5,000 credit points if Narukami learned lightning. He thanked them and wished them smooth days ahead. Another viewer followed up with their own offer. Viewers expressed hope that Narukami could save Pellis. Of course Narukami saw those comments. They were all spoiling things because the story had already been written. If Narukami remembered correctly, Pellis was supposed to die in the next stage. Narukami slowly extended his hand and the gesture left Pellis both surprised and delighted. Narukami told him to raise his head and declared that he would help him, proposing a promise that until all the giants were dead, none of them would die. Pellis thanked him repeatedly, expressing certainty that with Narukami joining them, the plan would go much more smoothly. A system prompt sounded. Stage 5 begins. Mission name Survival. Very soon their large force set out, and by rough estimate the marching party was close to 100 men. But at this moment Narukami's gaze was fixed on the live stream. At first he could still make out the comments, but once the viewer count rose, the chat turned into a runaway scroll wheel and there was no way to communicate anymore. Suddenly Pellis in front raised his hand, signaling the whole team to stop. The scar-faced man pointed at the giant ahead, noting that it had been wandering around all day as though it had no fear of being noticed. The thing before them was the giant leader, and one look at its size told them it would be difficult to handle. Pellis began assigning roles. He would draw its attention while Narukami was arranged to launch a sneak attack from behind. But Narukami directly placed a hand on his shoulder and told him to wait, urging Pellis to stay alert and warning that something felt wrong and like a trap. That leader in front of them was clearly bait. There were absolutely not just 10 giants nearby. The moment he finished speaking, violent tremors came from underground. Everyone's faces changed instantly. They were surrounded. Narukami confirmed it fully. The leader up ahead had been the trap meant to lure them in. In the next moment, the leader suddenly opened its eyes wide, its enormous eyeballs locking onto them. Immediately after, giants began appearing one after another beside it, bursting up from underground. From the very beginning, they had never been able to get close to the leader. The moment anyone approached, the giant horde would reveal itself, and there were far too many of them, far beyond what their force could withstand head-on. Pellis's face went deathly pale. He had thought this was an opportunity, but instead he had dragged everyone into a dead end. After the white giants appeared, they began tearing through the soldiers in a slaughter. Some tried to fight, but most had already had all courage sucked out of them by fear. The man who had just been shouting was torn apart alive by a white giant on the spot. That sight crushed everyone's hearts. The giant grinned grotesquely, mocking that lowly humans had wanted to ambush them and calling it ridiculous. Pellis roared, ordering everyone to retreat to the foot of the mountain. The team immediately collapsed into flight with no one caring about anything else. Life was what mattered most. The white giants let out a unified roar at the sky. They were excited, finally able to toy with humans again. Before long, the team suffered more casualties. Someone called out for them to regroup and come back. Those words pulled a little reason back into them, and they fled down the mountain in panic. On the mountain, only the scar-faced man and Pellis remained, but Pellis insisted that the scar-faced man leave. The team would still have to rely on him in the future. Just then, Narukami slowly walked toward them. Pellis froze. He called out to Narukami, telling him to go back as well, to rebuild order and to face the giants again later, declaring he would hold them there. But Narukami drew his sword. He stated that the line was his, and told Pellis and the scar-faced man to go and leave the place to him. He pressed further, asking why they were still not running. Pellis could not understand at all. Narukami made it brutally clear if Pellis stayed he could not fight freely, and that if he did not leave they would die there together. Pellis was too loyal to abandon an outsider and escape alone. Narukami's voice turned even colder. He warned Pellis not to make him say it a third time, and that if he stayed he would only get Narukami killed too. At last Pellis gritted his teeth and turned to run. He promised to gather the remaining men and urged Narukami to hold on until he came back. That was exactly what Narukami wanted. Once Pellis left, he could avoid the death trap originally waiting for him, and Narukami could also kill without restraint. As he ran, Pellis kept looking back, declaring that he owed Narukami his life, and promising he would come back to save him. And the giant horde also began pressing forward, lines of golden light rising across their bodies. Narukami charged straight at them, activating 2 major skills at once. When one giant was about to catch up to Pellis, Narukami accelerated once more. He declared that his opponent was him, and that without his permission none of them were allowed to leave. In the next second, he directly cut off that giant's leg, making sure it could never catch up again. Narukami began continuously weakening their speed, severing the legs of the foremost giants one by one. The advance of the giant horde was forcibly pinned down by him. The white giants had never expected that one tiny human could deal this kind of damage. In only a short while, he had already killed 2 giants and gained 20 achievement points. Even though this was only a trial, he still was not quite used to this feeling of being left alone. He began remembering the tactical coordination he once had while fighting side by side with his teammates. Aside from Narukami, even Pellis and his subordinates, who had originally been fated to die, might survive under Narukami's influence. Very soon, two white giants threw punches at Narukami. Narukami assumed an attacking stance. The moment the fists fell, he sidestepped and at the same time slashed open the chest of one of them. Immediately after, he made a huge lateral step and severed the other one's leg. If he wanted to win easily, he had to limit their movement first. With Narukami's damage output, killing one with a single sword strike was no longer difficult. The real problem was how long he could rely on the sword. So his first objective was to lock onto the leader. Only once the leader fell would this truly be over. Narukami stepped onto a giant's shoulder and swept his gaze around, searching for the leader's position. With a casual slash, he split open the head of the giant beneath him and gained another 10 points. He was moving faster and faster now and no longer had time to deal with the lesser mobs. He had to find the leader as soon as possible. At that moment, one giant was rather cunning and opened its huge mouth, waiting for Narukami to jump in. But what it got instead was Narukami planting a foot on its face. Narukami repeatedly stepped on the giant's faces, borrowing force to shift and leap continuously. That posture of daring to charge, daring to fight, daring to wager his life made even the people in the live stream suck in cold breaths. Viewers declared that the streamer was too ruthless and that one wrong step meant death, adding that aerial combat was Narukami's trademark and that here came another one. A system prompt sounded. The Wedge of Greed was resisting the backlash of the unnamed demonic blade, and the user's HP and mental power were recovering. Narukami was delighted. His stamina consumption had not changed, but his recovery had finally begun catching up. Equipment really could change the course of battle. He had not yet reached his limit. He had to kill the leader before he did. Very soon, Narukami locked onto the leader's position ahead. If he got just a little closer, he would be able to kill it. But at that moment, the leader revealed a chilling smile that made Narukami's heart tense. In the next second, the leader began its counterattack. If he could not finish it in one burst, then the one who would die would be Narukami. Its attack rapidly finished charging. If that weapon struck him, Narukami would be turned straight into minced flesh. For the first time, Narukami felt uncertain and inwardly told himself it had to work. In the next moment, he snapped his fingers without hesitation. A system prompt sounded. One usage of Thunder Magic Release had been successfully consumed. Immediately after, golden light crawled over his body. He told himself there was only one chance, and let thunder ring across the battlefield. In the next second, countless bolts of lightning burst out from Narukami's body. The white giants felt their eyes stabbed with pain, and the peals of thunder shook their eardrums. Her face had been dark the whole time. She muttered that yet another young upstart was cashing in on Narukami's fame. Suddenly, she also walked out of the hut. He asked with confusion why she was sitting outside. The woman replied that the sunlight was good that day, and that only like this did it count as truly enjoying time. Shu lowered his voice. He said that all of it needed to end. The woman agreed, saying within a year at most. Shu instantly got angry. He demanded to know what she meant by at most a year, and questioned why she always acted like that whenever things got serious. The more he thought about it, the more wrong it felt, so he simply walked over to her side to see what she was staring at. The woman explained that she was watching a new streamer who called himself Narukami. Hearing Narukami's name, Shu's heart jolted. He exclaimed that the boss had come back. The woman told him not to get excited, clarifying that this was obviously not that Narukami just a streamer borrowing his name while challenging a trial. The woman added that he understood it too, that if Narukami had really survived that crisis, its secret would have disappeared long ago and could not have hidden for so many years. Whether she wanted to admit it or not, Narukami had most likely died. She asked him when he was going to accept that. Shu turned away directly, unwilling to continue. He said that was enough for that day and told her not to bring it up again. No matter what, he refused to believe Narukami was dead. The woman raised her voice, demanding to know how long he was going to keep hiding in that child's shadow, and told him it was time to move on. Shu turned back and shot back at her, asking whether she had really let go herself. He snatched the phone from her hand. He pointed out that if she truly had, she would not be checking Narukami streams every day. He held the phone up in front of her, and the woman tried to insist she was just passing the time, but in the next second her whole body froze. She whispered that it was impossible. Shu also could not help glancing at it. He remarked that she still liked watching streams, and said he wanted to see what kind of person this was. With that one look, his jaw nearly dropped to the ground. The second one had appeared. At the same time, the thunder art inside Narukami continued to surge outward. None of the white giants could get close to him. Not only that, their bodies were also being continuously scorched by the thunder art. Gradually, the thunder art inside Narukami settled down. This meant he had completely mastered it. The live stream lost control completely. A second Narukami is going to be born today. Only then did they realize that to obtain the thunder skill, he had to kill that enormous leader. Listening to the discussion in the chat, Narukami's eyes grew more wary. This was not a place where they should be learning this. The system panel prompted that the lightning skill required HP and MP to activate. It could be upgraded by collecting thunder fragments, but for Narukami, being able to stay alive was already lucky enough. Had it not been for him holding back these giants, they wouldn't have all died there. Meanwhile, inside the guild building, two people stared nervously at WA. After seeing Narukami clear the stage, WA said nothing, got up, sat on the sofa, and covered her face with both hands. Her partner asked the supervisor, was he really worth going this far for? The supervisor replied that he did not understand women's hearts. WA's body trembled slightly as she murmured that it was over, and that she thought she had fallen in love. A few years ago, when she had still been a little girl, she had felt this once before. The moment she thought of the message she had just sent Narukami, she began to get nervous. She wondered if it was too cold, if it sounded too official, and whether she should have added more human-sounding words to increase the chance of a reply. Her partner was at a loss for words, reminding her that the message was official business, and pressed her to just admit clearly whether she actually liked him. The boss was equally speechless, noting that she had kept insisting on recruiting him into the guild and demanded to know whether it was because she wanted to pursue him. WA explained with a red face that she could not control it, and that now that he fought as Earth's representative player, the pressure on his shoulders must be immense. Today we'll break down his skills. Of course, the legendary Narukami who transcends eras won't be absent either. No matter what anyone says, lightning belongs to that man. But when you think of a name no hunter could ever catch up to, who comes to mind at this moment? The one occupying everyone's mind is probably only him, Narukami. Today, Hawkeyes was preparing to use his lock-on analysis to dig deep into the hottest current player, Narukami. Someone in the chat questioned whether he was just chasing hype, adding that the newbie had only just reached the second floor. But Hawkeye said that beginners deserved a chance too, and that people should not shoot them down with criticism right away. He acknowledged that being a streamer was hard. He clicked into Narukami's page, pulled up the stream footage, and exclaimed that it was insane, and questioned what on earth was happening. After watching all the footage, sweat had formed on his forehead. The concentration he witnessed was terrifying. Narukami had just learned the skill, yet he could already use it to this extent. It did not seem human at all. Even more outrageous was that Hawkeyes could tell Narukami was controlling the skill by injecting only exactly the amount of energy needed, not wasting even a trace of power. To do that required ultimate microcontrol and judgment, and throughout the entire battle he had not made a single mistake. In the end, Hawkeyes gave his evaluation, declaring that the guy would definitely become a major figure and that from that point on he would be keeping his eyes on him. Later, Narukami arrived at a cafe. He casually found a seat and sat down, then began looking into the company's background. It was a massive entertainment company whose executives invested money to push streamers into rapid growth. He had never expected the world to become like this, that even a company like this had appeared, and on such an absurd scale. Another pop-up appeared on his phone, the content flooding in like spam. Hawkeyes' next target was the newcomer Narukami, and rumor had it that his control had already surpassed the original. Narukami thought to himself that it looked like Hawkeyes was mixed up with Azure Sky too. Hawkeyes had always been blunt and never pulled punches. But from Narukami's perspective, he really did have a sharp eye for people, having actually locked onto him at first glance. Just then, another set of footsteps entered the cafe. The newcomer had also seen Hawkeyes' coverage and felt even more irritated, cursing quietly under his breath, because Hawkeyes had commented on him, specifically the line stating that in terms of control alone, Narukami might already have surpassed his own peak. That line made the man extremely uncomfortable. Eventually, Narukami asked if he could leave. Narukami turned and stared at him, asking if he needed something else, and warning him not to waste his time. That response lit Isaac up completely, and he grabbed Narukami by the collar. He told him not to get too cocky and to wipe that smug look off his face, threatening to beat him so hard his teeth would scatter across the floor, just like he used to crush him before. Narukami quietly apologized. At the same time, he placed a hand on Isaac's wrist. With a flex of his arm, he flung Isaac's hand away. He told him he had no time to play with him, and that if he wanted trouble, he should go find someone else. Isaac's heart jolted. He wondered if this guy's grip had always been this absurdly strong. His hand was still trembling from the force, remarking that hurting his hand just now could serve as compensation for his coffee. That line twisted Isaac's expression with rage. He demanded to know when Narukami had gotten this arrogant and told him to get back. The only reply he got was the sound of Narukami closing the door. Isaac let out a long breath. He had originally wanted to climb the tower quietly this time, but now he was truly enraged. He told himself that if he did not beat the hell out of him, Narukami would not know who he was. And not just him, but that new streamer too. He muttered that both Narukami's were seriously going to drive him to his grave. After leaving the cafe, Narukami suddenly remembered something. He still had not replied to that entertainment company. He immediately sent a reply to the guild. Not long after, Narukami headed for the dungeon and arrived at the room where the exiled lizard boss was hiding. His grip was still resisting the backlash of the unnamed demonic blade, and his body was also adapting to that impact. Little by little, above his head, a small flame suddenly appeared. The flame rapidly swelled. It was actually the exiled lizard boss itself. A notification appeared, indicating that the skill level was rising. At this moment, Narukami had already arrived directly above the demon lizard. He poured all the power in his body into his arm. The strike was fatal. In an instant, the demon lizard's body was split cleanly in two by the lightning slash. After successfully killing the exiled lizard, his level and all his attributes rose, and his mana also recovered. Just as he finished dealing with the loot and was preparing to leave, a figure appeared in front of him. Narukami's eyes turned cold. This person carried killing intent. The man slowly approached and stopped in front of him, asking why he was still hanging around so late, and whether he was planning to go out hunting. The one blocking Narukami's way was Isaac, a man stubborn to a frightening degree, having followed him all the way there just to make trouble. But the more he thought about it, the more suffocated with anger he felt, and in the end he still came after Narukami. Isaac asked whether they could settle it today. Narukami sneered inwardly, questioning how exactly Isaac planned to settle it. At the same time, elsewhere, Hawkeye's walked into a shop. As soon as he entered, someone raised a hand to signal to him. That person was the guild president. Hawkeye's had been called here this time precisely to get a clear reading on Narukami. What Isaac wanted to tell Narukami was his purpose in coming to smash to pieces that smug look on Narukami's face. He pressed closer, continuing to sneer. He taunted Narukami, calling him a guy who climbed that far on luck, and questioned whether he actually thought he had become Narukami, and whether he wanted to learn lightning like that streamer too. Then he tensed his fingers and cursed through gritted teeth. He spat that if Narukami was dead he should stay in his grave and rot, and that people like him disgusted him. Narukami did not understand why this guy hated the name to such an extent. More ironically, even Narukami himself had never imagined that he would arrive in an era filled everywhere with imposters bearing his name. At that moment Narukami spoke, asking Isaac why he hated him, whether it was simply because of his name, and if so, why he despised it so much when clearly a great many people admired it. After hearing Narukami's question, Isaac's expression visibly faltered. Then he asked coldly who Narukami thought his father was. Reinhardt, a high-level player on the 9th floor. After unleashing his strongest blow, Isaac let out a long breath. He covered his face as though in regret. He had been wrong. He had underestimated himself and had actually taken Narukami out with one move. But when he lowered his hand, satisfaction appeared on his face instead. He declared that now that he had dealt with Narukami, he would go find that masked brat next. Yet, Narukami's voice suddenly exploded in his mind. Narukami asked if by mask, Isaac meant this one. There in the depths of the smoke, Narukami's figure stood straight and upright, and at this moment he had already put on the mask, becoming the true Narukami. Isaac could not believe it. He exclaimed that Narukami had actually blocked his attack with his bare hands. That figure before the sea of fire looked like a god of slaughter descending. Instinctively, he felt something was wrong. The person in front of him was absolutely not the Narukami he had known before. But in the instant he lost focus, lightning gathered beneath Narukami's feet. In the blink of an eye, Narukami vanished from where he stood. In the next second, he appeared in front of Isaac at the limit of speed and slammed a fist brutally into his abdomen. The force of that punch made Isaac's pupils widen. He could not comprehend how Narukami could be this strong. After taking that punch, Isaac dropped heavily to his knees. In the next instant, blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. Narukami looked down at him from above. He stated that when someone destroys what matters to him, he loses control. Isaac still could not believe it. He refused to accept that Narukami had become this strong, demanding to know how he was even here. At that moment, Narukami slowly removed the mask. He told Isaac that the blow just now was only a surprise test, and asked who Isaac thought was standing in front of him. The crying Narukami he used to bully, the streamer Narukami wearing a mask, or blue-eyed Narukami. A sneer formed at the corner of Isaac's mouth. He told him to cut the crap, questioning whether Narukami was trying to claim he was that streamer. Even now, he still looked down on Narukami. He scoffed that lightning was nothing special, and that if trash like Narukami could learn it, then so could he. In the next second, flames silently condensed in his hand. He challenged Narukami, asking if he really thought that with such a small amount of skill he could beat him. Narukami only found his stubbornness laughable. The facts were right in front of him, and he was still denying them. As Isaac spoke, the flames in his palm grew denser and denser. He was going to grab Narukami in one move and crush him completely. But what he had not expected came next. In barely a second, his hand flew into the air. Narukami's lightning flash had directly severed his arm. The moment he saw that, Isaac went ice cold all over, his very soul trembling. In truth, from the moment he insulted Narukami's companions, he had already been doomed to die. The fact that Narukami had been willing to listen to his nonsense this long was already the last mercy. He could not understand the meaning in Narukami's words, and turned them over in his mind again and again. From Narukami asked Woei if something was wrong. She quickly replied that there was nothing, and urged them to continue discussing business. The president had warned her before. Whether she could win his trust on the first meeting was crucial, and no matter what, she absolutely could not seem unreliable. But she felt she had already ruined it the moment they met. The more she thought about it, the more frustrated she became, her fingers nearly tearing her hair apart. To keep things from getting awkward, Woei hurriedly changed the subject. She asked if Narukami had been a Narukami fan before. Narukami nodded, saying he was a die-hard fan, but that he was not the real one, so she could relax. But it was as if she had not heard him. She confessed that she was a die-hard Narukami fan too, and that now she was his fan as well. Then Narukami heard her pour out a huge stream of words in one breath. She told him she had been watching ever since his job hunting stream started, that she may have even been his first viewer, from the first time he soloed the one-eyed bats, to clearing Greg's trial, to the match where he chose a fair duel instead of taking the easy route. She admitted her palms were sweating when he faced the Titan fragment, but that he had instantly beaten it. Narukami asked one more thing, whether all managers were like her. Wika was a little embarrassed. She admitted the others were more professional and more reliable, though she was quick to add that she was not saying she herself was unprofessional. That was not actually what Narukami meant. He just felt that Wika's aura did not resemble that of an ordinary hunter. He wondered if the overall level of hunters had really risen so high that even someone like her was working as a manager. That also meant that from now on the opponents Narukami would face would only grow stronger. He had no time to rest, and had to keep accelerating. Dawei, meanwhile, was still blaming herself. She feared she had made him think she was unreliable, and worried about what she would do if Narukami refused, whether she would have to force the contract through on sheer willpower. At that moment, Narukami slowly extended his hand. He told her he could tell she was trustworthy, and that he agreed to join, looking forward to working together. Dawei nearly burst into tears on the spot. This was the first time she had been trusted so quickly. After the signing was finished, Narukami started streaming again the very next day, preparing to enter the trial. But not long after, he discovered that the stream already had 700 viewers. Narukami froze. He had only just gone live, so how had so many people suddenly appeared? He wondered if the guild was promoting him. The truth was exactly what he suspected. One had frantically mobilized her friends and relatives to share the stream and had even pulled internal company staff into helping promote it. Narukami let out a light laugh, thinking that choosing their guild really had been the right decision. Then he declared that the game could begin. The legendary stage was about to start. These people were the Scar-Faced Man, Pellis, and the others, all assembled to discuss how to subjugate the giants. Pellis asked the Scar-Faced Man whether their benefactor had arrived yet. The Scar-Faced Man replied that he had not. Very soon, someone raised the concern of whether it was really wise to place their hopes on someone who was not even a knight, expressing doubt that Narukami could possibly kill the giants and warning that unless they saw it with their own eyes, they might very well be getting deceived. Pellis roared, telling them all to shut up and demanding what right they had to question their benefactor. Just then, a familiar voice sounded. Narukami called out to Sir Pellis. Looking up, they saw Narukami standing right outside the tent. Pellis immediately went up to him. He asked if Narukami's injuries had recovered. Narukami assured him there was no serious problem and that he no longer needed support and could move normally. Someone stared at Narukami with a complicated expression. A new fan entered the live stream and remarked that this was the one who defeated the giant leader, adding that honestly he did not look strong at all, and that the mask was way too suspicious. Narukami moved slightly and replied that it sounded like the viewer still did not believe he had done it. He then raised his voice, declaring that an ancient legend had been passed down to this day. Atop a 1,000-year mountain peak that pierced the clouds, a fragment of lightning was said to be hidden, and Pellis believed that only one person could find it. That person was Narukami. A village burst into raging flames and the villagers fled in all directions, only because a group of giants was advancing upon them. Behind the giants stood an even larger long-haired giant, declaring vengeance for his son. He grabbed one of the village soldiers and crushed him to death with the slightest squeeze of his fingers, swearing to use human blood to let his son rest in peace. Not far away, Narukami stared fixedly at that figure. This thing really was different from the giants before. It was far stronger. The livestream viewers were frightened, flooding the chat with disbelief at how enormous it was. Narukami pulled on the reins, his mind racing over how he was supposed to deal with it. Someone in the stream urged him to abandon the mission, insisting that if he kept going he would definitely die, as that giant was not something he could handle at all. He remembered Pellis's words that the giant would probably reach them in about 3 days, and that if by then Narukami still had not found thunder, he hoped he would evacuate as that was the only way out and he had to obey for his own safety. Very soon, Narukami arrived at 1,000-Year Mountain. Fortunately, the giants had not yet grasped the key point. Very soon, a string of mission prompts popped up before Narukami and people began donating. At this moment, Narukami stood at the foot of 1,000-Year Mountain. According to Pellis, the lightning fragment was hidden here, but the problem remained. How exactly was he supposed to obtain it? Pellis had said the lightning fragment existed only in legend. It might be a power, an item, or even a person. In reality, no one knew for sure. The only thing that could be confirmed was that the person who had once wielded lightning had wiped out the giants in one stroke. At the same time, Juan received a call from the guild president. She excitedly told him that she had already signed the contract. A hearty laugh came from the other end of the line. The president praised her and told her to keep up the good work, adding that he would assign her some targets afterward. After hanging up, Juan happily flopped onto the bed, ready to watch Narukami stream. Watching his streams was her favorite thing. Very soon she opened the stream, but in the next second she heard Narukami say that in this tower there was no trial he could not overcome. Juan's heart suddenly sank, and she immediately sat upright, alarmed that he had accidentally said what was on his mind. That was something the original Narukami had said 20 years ago, and now he had repeated it in front of so many people. Meanwhile, at the foot of 1,000-Year Mountain, Narukami was charged with thunder from head to toe, preparing to try the method he had just thought of. He slammed a fist into the mountain wall, then suddenly drew back his fist to gather strength. He poured all the power in his body into his fist and struck the mountain again with thunder crackling endlessly in his ears. A moment later, some tiny fragments fell from the rock layers. Narukami gave a low laugh. He had found the lightning fragments. He had done this because he felt a powerful force of lightning pulling him, and the result was exactly as he had guessed. Inside the mountain, a door was hidden, and the power he had sensed was behind it. Narukami did not hesitate and stepped forward immediately. Even the livestream audience was stunned. They were seeing it for the first time too. Very soon, Narukami arrived beneath the stone door and slowly pressed his hand against it. The instant his fingers touched the stone door, he felt a current respond. A system prompt appeared. Lightning was being generated. At the same time, his wedge of greed was resisting the thunder recoil. At this moment, Narukami directly condensed lightning in his palm. Whatever he was searching for had to be inside that door. That earlier pulling sensation had been as though it were calling out to him. His most direct answer was to blast the door open with even stronger lightning. The thunder around Narukami surged violently and slammed into the crack of the door. Under the erosion of lightning, the stone door trembled violently. Very soon, Narukami saw a gap tear open in the seam. The door had been forced open. He remarked to himself that the trial had been hidden deep, and that had thunder not been pulling him, he would never have guessed the door was inside the mountain. Narukami lifted his foot and walked in. He would follow the path he had once walked and walk it once more through the echo of thunder. After he stepped through the stone door, it closed again. Unless he completed the stage inside, he would absolutely not get out. At the same time, Pellis was still discussing countermeasures with several senior officers. One old man questioned whether Pellis really believed that person could obtain the power of thunder. Pellis did not waver, insisting that Narukami definitely could, and that if even he could not do it, then no one could. The old man pushed back, telling him it was easy to say that and that he had no idea how terrifying that giant truly was. Just then, a loud explosion suddenly came from outside the tent. A violent tremor followed, making even the cups on the table shake. Very soon, a soldier rushed in with urgent news: the giants had attacked. At that moment, no one in the tent could remain seated, their faces full of shock. Meanwhile, inside the cave, Narukami raised his vigilance to the maximum after entering. He did not know what the thing pulling him wanted him to do. He walked inside for a long time yet saw nothing. A fan in the live stream pointed out that it was not that there was nothing there, but that lightning was too fast to see. That was true before a discharge. Lightning was only dispersed electric charge, and ordinary people could not see it at all. Even Narukami could not see it, as the speed of the charge exceeded what the naked eye could catch. So Narukami slowly closed his eyes. 3 days later, Narukami felt an even stronger lightning force calling to him from deep inside the cave. He abruptly opened his eyes as a thought rose in his mind. He bent down, picked up a stone, and immediately threw it forward at high speed. Sure enough, just as he had expected, invisible lightning filled the air, and the farther one went inside, the stronger the reaction became. Very soon, under the compounding speed, the stone was ground directly into powder. When the livestream viewers saw this, they were all stunned. Cold sweat seeped from Narukami's forehead. He told himself that the danger level exceeded expectations and that the stage appeared to be testing endurance. If he could not withstand it, he would die there. Very soon, people in the live stream began encouraging him, and someone posted a 100-point task. They warned that he had to reach the top, otherwise he might lose the thunder skill he had just learned. More and more viewers began supporting him, and the total mission reward points quickly piled up to 3,000. Narukami made up his mind and stepped forward. In an instant, streaks of lightning flashed all over his body. He first thanked everyone for the rewards, then declared that he would definitely complete the mission. Meanwhile, Juan was watching Narukami's stream. Rina did not press much further, and even started saying strange things about quiet people growing their hair faster. Rina had been troubled lately. Ever since Shu had made that remark, she had been holding herself back from watching Narukami's streams, and it was driving her crazy. Shu had no mood to chat with her, and only wanted to hurry back and continue watching the stream. He asked how long she planned to stay. Rina grew even more confused. Shu had never driven her away before. She asked if she could relax on his sofa for a bit, puzzled by his reaction. Shu deliberately raised his voice, trying to drive her away. He shouted out to Rhea, asking what they were eating tonight, grilled fish or grilled meat. He was shouting like ultrasonic waves, and Rhea's eardrums were about to burst, all while his fingers were pressing down on the phone's volume button for dear life. He was terrified that even the slightest bit of stream audio might leak out for her to hear. Rina felt something was far too off about him today, and that there had to be something wrong, so she turned to leave. She told him she was done, and that he could do whatever he wanted. Seeing her leave, Shu finally let out a breath of relief. He even added a hollow parting line, offering her bread or the sofa if she wanted. But Rina could no longer be bothered with him. Rina slammed the door shut. Shu thought to himself how close that had been. He had almost been caught red-handed, and quickly resumed watching the stream. If Rina discovered he was watching Narukami's stream, she would definitely make a huge scene, and he did not even dare imagine that argument. Shu looked somewhat lonely. Even if their positions were reversed, Narukami would not have forgotten them. And the more he watched, the more he felt that this person was becoming more and more like the boss, to the frightening point that even his way of speaking and personality felt similar. There was only one difference. Desperately scrambling for points was nothing like the boss's style. The boss had never risked his life for money. At that thought, Shu gave a low laugh, wondering to himself who this person really was, and remarking that he was far too much like him. Fully focused, he failed to notice that a hand had already landed on his shoulder. He slowly turned around, never expecting Rina to have doubled back and caught him completely off guard. Rina stared at him with a dark expression, telling him she knew something was wrong and demanding to know if he really thought she would not notice. The live stream viewers were totally confused, flooding the chat asking why Narukami was not running. Narukami said quietly that from that point on he might not be able to keep chatting with them anymore. He advanced toward the front step by step. His reaching the end had always been inevitable. The lightning damage was indeed severe. Even his palms had been burned black. but it still was not enough to stop him. At that moment, Hawkeye's was also staring at Narukami's stream. From the very second Narukami went live, Hawkeye's had not looked away once. The president had long since told Hawkeye's that they had gone to great lengths to invite Narukami to collaborate with him. This was no small matter. After all, the last time President John personally stepped in to handle something had been a very long time ago, and John had repeatedly brought it up with Hawkeye's before. John had pointed out that the commercial operation of streaming could only be taken so far by one person alone. Hawkeye's had smiled at the time. He believed that popularity would only drive certain categories of players of similar types. After circling around so much, what John had really wanted to say came down to one sentence. Narukami was not really a streamer. He was a genuine hunter. Though he was a novice streamer, he was broadcasting from an observer's perspective. John believed this was an opportunity. They absolutely had to seize this comet, ride its momentum skyward, and become stars that rose alongside him. That line had indeed left Hawkeye stunned, but in the next second, golden light lit up in his eyes. He agreed that the president was right and that it really was an opportunity. More than anyone else, he longed to become a star. Hawkeye's wanted to hang in the galaxy above the 9 heavens like a star. From the day he entered the world of streaming, that had been his one and only dream. He instinctively reached out a hand as if trying to confirm whether he too could stand at that kind of height. But in the next second, he suddenly came back to himself, shaking off the thought and fixing his eyes back on Narukami's stream. It would have been better if he had not looked, because the instant he did, his expression changed. He demanded to know if this guy had gone insane and who had given him this much nerve. At this moment, under the crushing pressure of the lightning, Narukami had already advanced a considerable distance. During that time, his skin had been burned away piece by piece. His arms too were charred black. Yet, even injured to this extent, Narukami still did not make a single sound. He slowly lifted his foot, preparing to take another step. The instant his foot came down heavily, countless bolts of lightning surged up from the ground and shot directly into his body. Narukami mobilized all the power in his body to resist by force. This wave was fiercer and deeper than the last. After a while, he finally endured it and began gasping for breath. Though he discovered that the stronger the lightning, the deeper it penetrated his body. Narukami felt it was almost enough. There was already a dangerously large amount of lightning inside his body, and he could sense it surging into the central meridians and every tiny branch channel. A system progress bar appeared, 20.7%. When the progress reached 1/5, his meridians were forcibly evolved by the lightning. In other words, marrow cleansing. Every time lightning passed through his meridians, part of it would remain behind, sink into his body and become his magic power. But some of it would also escape, so he had to hold it tightly and make it completely his own. The 2 central meridians ran through the front and back of the body, while the fine channels spread across every corner. And when the fine channels were opened, it meant thunder had reached every part of the body. With this body, Narukami directly skipped the process of purifying the fine channels, taking a shortcut, no longer going the long way around as he once had. At this moment, blood seeped from the corner of Narukami's mouth. His injuries were severe. Normally, he would have used magic to accomplish all of this. Elsewhere, Juan was leaning against a wall, watching the stream, her eyes full of worry. Just from the footage alone, she could tell how cruel this stage was. She could see that Narukami was forcibly opening his fine blood vessels. The first time she had ever seen someone do it this way, moving his body without relying on his own magic or inner force, instead prying them open through external power alone. That level of pain absolutely exceeded imagination. An ordinary person would not even be able to sit upright and would have passed out long ago. Death in the tower would not carry over into reality, but pain was absolutely real. Juan's hands were trembling as she watched. Unable to understand why he was pushing himself this far, all she wanted was for Narukami to come back safely and for his mind not to be damaged. Narukami kept receiving system prompts. Progress had reached 50, fine channels were evolving, thunder power was surging inside the body, and mana was increasing. And at that very moment, a trace of sadness suddenly rose in his heart. He thought of the arrogant self he once had been, and suddenly realized he was almost like the murderer who had killed them with his own hands. Back when they challenged the 8th floor, he had told his teammates there was no trial he could not overcome, assuring them not to worry, and promising that as long as he was there, they would definitely be safe because the final winner would inevitably be him. And after hearing that, the team members had shown him complete, unreserved trust. Rina and Shu had believed him most deeply of all. They were the ones who understood him best. But if not for his arrogance, they would never have been wiped out. If he had not said those careless words back then, if his conceit had not pushed everyone forward, they would not have died. He told himself that the source of the sin was him, that they were never supposed to die, and that one day he would make Itsuki pay with his own hands. The moment Itsuki's face surfaced in his mind, another surge of power erupted inside Narukami, forcing him to continue forward. He condemned himself, saying it was all his fault and that he did not deserve to be captain. In the next second, Narukami's body crashed heavily to the ground. He was covered in wounds, his consciousness beginning to blur, and he could pass out at any time. But when he opened his eyes again, the scene before him had changed. Narukami froze. He had no idea where he was, and he seemed to have become Narukami again. He turned his head and saw a group of people camping behind him. Those people were all the Blue Eyes members from back then. Narukami suddenly shoved aside the grass and rushed over, treating all of it as a dream. They had to still be alive. They had to still be safe and sound. Very soon he approached the 2 figures at the very back. With tears in his eyes, he wanted to reach out to them, telling them he had nightmares every day and that he had been scared half to death. But the two of them turned around and told him coldly that he was the one who had driven them into a dead end. Their appearance made Narukami jolt in shock. He demanded to know what had happened to them. Even the girl beside them slowly spoke, asking why he had said so many beautiful heroic words yet had not protected them, and telling him to look at how miserably they had died. Seeing Chino's expression, Narukami's pupils contracted violently. Flames rose from all of them as they closed in on him step by step. Narukami wanted to explain, but his throat seemed locked shut, unable to force out even half a word. Looking at their burning bodies, Narukami felt as if his heart were being torn apart. He begged them not to go, pleading for them to stay. For he rushed forward and tried to grab them, but no matter whom he reached for, he could not hold on to anyone. Narukami dropped helplessly to his knees, his voice breaking as he cried out that it was all his fault. With a boom, a burst of light exploded in his mind. A voice cut through, reminding them that protecting the village was their responsibility. After saying that, the voice's owner slowly drew his long sword. He declared that knights were not those who were protected, but those who protected others, and called for anyone with courage to charge alongside him. In the next moment, Dale rushed out. Though aged, every step he took was as heavy as iron. Following behind him were Pellis and a group of fearless knights. Dale shouted that today they would die in the posture of true knights. Meanwhile, Narukami's progress had already reached 99 and was about to end, but at the same time his body was also nearing its limit, and he was not sure whether he could endure the final 1%. In front of him floated a round bead. He did not know what it was, but judging from the progress, it was the final hurdle. Very soon, Narukami's fatigue soared to 97. Once fatigue reached 100, he would die. His mask was nearly shattered, and lines of blood kept seeping from the corners of his eyes. Only one final step remained. He absolutely could not fall here. The system issued a red warning that he had to recover his stamina, and that continuing to move was extremely dangerous. But Narukami ignored it and lifted his foot again. Elsewhere, Dale stamped heavily on the ground. He told himself that today, this old knight would stand at the very front, and that even if he died, he would die usefully. With that thought, strength surged into his arm. He brought his sword down across the giant's arm, and a huge spray of blood burst out on the spot. The giant screamed as though it had never suffered such a wound in its entire life. Immediately afterward, its attack lunged straight at Dale, but Dale calmly dodged aside. The giant's body was too large and its movements were slow. Pellis charged in with sword in hand, urging Dale to hold on and declaring that he was coming to support him. With a furious roar, he poured all his strength into his blade, telling Dale to leave the rest to him. He stepped onto the monster's knee in one stride, borrowed that force and leapt straight for the monster's head, its only weak point. At this moment, Pellis looked like a knight beneath moonlight. His sword came down, hacking viciously into the monster's skull, and with a flash of blade light, the monster's head fell on the spot. Its enormous body slowly collapsed. No one had expected Pellis to be this strong. With a thunderous crash, Pellis landed back on the ground. The knights behind him erupted in celebration, praising both Sir Pellis and Sir Dale. Pellis looked at Dale, thanking him for the reminder, and noted that the most dangerous one was dead, and that they could finally catch their breath. But Dale only said one word: no. His expression was grave. He told Pellis that was not the monster he had been talking about. At this moment, a few soldiers were still mocking, saying that giants were only this much after all. In the next second, their smiles froze. A giant foot came down directly on one man's head, and in the next moment, his body was crushed into fragments. Pellis and Dale finally saw the newcomer clearly. Dale warned with extreme urgency that this was the monster he had meant. Pellis's expression changed sharply. He declared that this was on a completely different level and that they could not possibly beat it, ordering everyone to retreat. At the same time, Narukami's progress had already reached the final point. Dragging his heavy steps, he finally stood before the sphere of light. The instant he grabbed it, the progress jumped to 100%. He promised himself that he would finish everything, then go to hell and apologize to them, that he would bring Itsuki's head and offer it as their memorial. Gradually, several bolts of lightning gathered around him, converging toward the orb. In the next second, enormous lightning directly enveloped him. Even he had not expected this. After being pierced through by the lightning strike, Narukami still did not fall. It was finally over, evolution complete. But at that very moment, Narukami's pupils suddenly contracted. He felt something was wrong inside his body. A notification appeared. All attributes increased by 20%, all attributes +2. For a moment, Narukami could not say a word. He thought to himself that even at the very end, it still had to hit him with one more of those, and that at the very least it should have let him explain to the livestream how powerful that final strike had been. With a thud, Narukami collapsed heavily to the ground, his head tilting to one side as he fell into deep sleep. A system prompt appeared. Stage 6 legend cleared. When the chairman saw this scene, his forehead was covered in cold sweat. He thought that no matter how reckless someone was, they should still know what limits meant. John tapped the tabletop with his fingertip, remarking that it looked like Narukami was not suited for live streaming. At that moment, Hawkeyes suddenly called in. John told him he was watching Narukami's live stream, and Hawkeyes instantly erupted, calling the guy completely insane. John told him to calm down and explain things clearly so everyone could understand. Hawkeyes laughed loudly, declaring that Narukami was really going to become a star streamer. John frowned, saying he thought Narukami looked more like a player than a streamer. But John had no idea what Hawkeyes really meant. The core thing the audience wanted from this live stream was a Narukami who was closer to his real self, because the real Narukami had never been a streamer in the first place. From beginning to end, he had always been a thorough player. In other words, they were about to witness with their own eyes the return of the real Narukami. Only then did John finally understand what Hawkeyes was talking about. The live stream was still ongoing. No one knew how much time had passed when a hand pressed against the ground and slowly dragged the body upright. Everyone in the live stream froze. They had never expected him to actually still be alive. Narukami's vision was blurry, and he immediately summoned the status window to check his fatigue value. It read 81, still 19 points away from 100, much lower than before. It seemed that improving his attributes really had been useful. On top of that, the unexpected lightning strike had nearly killed him outright, but the outcome was not the worst possible. He had completed the challenge, and all the points the audience had donated had gone straight into his pocket. But with his current strength, he was no match for the monster in a direct confrontation. To bring down the giant, only one key thing remained: the lightning in his hand. A system prompt appeared. This was an ancient spear carved from thunder itself. Meanwhile, Pelas pointed his sword in a direction and told the giant that the one who had killed his son went that way, urging it to go kill him now, and adding under his breath that the reason he had gone there was to gather strength so he could return and destroy them all. Pelas prayed frantically in his heart, begging the giant to take the bait and spare the women and children in the village. The giant looked in the direction the sword pointed. The next second, it whipped its head back, its face full of rage. It accused Pelas of lying and demanded to know if he thought it was that easy to fool, questioning whether the one who killed its son was not there, or whether Pelas had just pointed his broken sword in some random direction. That roar nearly suffocated Pelas with fear. Just as the giant was about to strike, violent thunder exploded from the mountaintop. The giant froze for a moment, then turned to look. There really was someone over there. Pelas was so shocked he lost his voice, marveling that his benefactor had really succeeded and that he had known he could create a miracle. On the hill, wind surged and clouds churned as lightning crisscrossed. That lightning was exactly what Narukami had detonated on the mountaintop, for one purpose only: to draw the white-haired giant over. It had to be said that Pelas had made an extremely correct choice in buying time by delaying it. A system prompt appeared. Stage 7, Thunder, was about to begin, and this might also be the final stage. Standing atop the hill, Narukami stared at the town ahead. As long as he killed them, this mission would be over. Someone in the livestream warned him that the giant seemed many times bigger than before. Narukami's heart sank. If it really was bigger than before, then this was not normal second-floor content. His fans urged him to run immediately, insisting that a giant monster like that could not be killed. Narukami replied with only one sentence, that it was fine and that he still had a chance. He immediately took out every item from storage. The next moment, Narukami directly activated the lightning spear. At once, a black spear appeared in his hand, a weapon formed from lightning. The price appeared immediately after. His fatigue value began rising like crazy. Sure enough, just as he had expected, his skill level was too low to sustain a legendary item. His fatigue value kept surging upward, and the spear's activation reached 50%. Even so, he could only grit his teeth and endure it. Meanwhile, the white-haired giant advanced, carrying suppressed grief and vowing that its son must have suffered a great deal, and that it would make them pay twice over. Its footsteps grew faster and faster, and in almost the blink of an eye it charged 100 meters forward, its face filled with overwhelming hatred. It was too fast, and at most 2 or 3 steps, it could pounce right in front of Narukami. Yet the lightning spear had still not fully formed. On the mountaintop, countless bolts of lightning fell from the sky and poured into the tip of Narukami's spear. The outcome between him and the white-haired giant might have been 50-50, but the viewers felt he could not possibly hit, and even if he did, that he could not kill it. What they did not know was that there were only 2 possible outcomes: hit or miss. There was no third option. The first step was to lock his gaze onto the target and never let it shift away. His squad members had taught him that long ago, that no matter what the target was, his eyes could not leave it, and that he should throw the spear only at the end, forgetting the throwing motion, forgetting the perfect arc, throwing away every distracting thought, and only then could he read the target's movements in advance. And as for all of that, they had told him he actually did not need any of it. Trajectory, calculations, all of it could go to hell. He was not like other people because he was Narukami. After being praised like that, Narukami had actually felt a little awkward. At this moment, the lightning spear's activation rate had already reached 95. After waiting just a little longer, it would all be over, and Narukami's eyes were still locked firmly on the white-haired giant. The white-haired giant was getting closer and closer, yet Narukami still had not thrown the spear. The live stream was going crazy, with viewers demanding to know what he was doing and why he had not fired yet, warning that if he hesitated any longer he would die. Narukami knew he could not rush. The moment he rushed, everything would collapse. The white-haired giant seemed completely unafraid of lightning, climbing upward even faster. The next second, its huge foot slammed heavily onto the rock wall. With a push from its legs, the entire body of the white-haired giant launched into the air. When it leaped into midair, Narukami's eyes were still locked tightly onto it. The opportunity had come. At that moment, the final surge of lightning power fell from the sky and completely poured into the spear. The system prompted that the spear's activation rate had reached 100 and that he could now counterattack. Narukami adjusted into the most stable posture for exerting force, preparing to throw. He had only one chance. If he failed, he would certainly die. The white-haired giant's face twisted grotesquely, its enormous hand already reaching for him, and Narukami was ready as well. This strike had to decide the battle, and he absolutely could not give the enemy any chance to counterattack. So without half a second of hesitation, he threw. A system prompt appeared. Thunder Stage 7 had been cleared. All of his attributes increased across the board, and he obtained a rare item, the Heart of Thunder. Narukami noted to himself that it was his first time seeing it too. Just then, the Heart of Thunder burst with blinding light. The intense radiance forced his eyes shut, but when he opened them again, he found that he was already somewhere else. In the sky ahead hung a gigantic shadow of a giant, too enormous to describe. He was chilled to his core. The pressure was far too intense. Even stranger, he could not make a sound and could not move his body either. He wondered if this was the pressure of a giant. The system panel began frantically prompting. Many unknown beings were watching him. The flood of information left him completely stunned. He questioned who these beings were and why the giants had brought him there, vaguely sensing that the source of all the clues lay within the Heart of Thunder. By the time he returned to the village again, it was already dawn. A system prompt appeared. The main storyline, Thunder, was about to begin, and he could use the Heart of Thunder to search for clues in the village. Quite a few people were still in the live stream, puzzled as to why it was not over yet. Narukami looked up at the sunrise and then realized he had blacked out once again. He slowly got to his feet, suppressing his questions. For now, whatever had just happened could wait. He had to go back first. He had almost forgotten the most practical matter of all. He had not yet claimed his points, and there would definitely be a great many after this run. Sure enough, the next second when he claimed them, he found that there were tens of thousands of points, bringing his total to over 40,000. The fans wanted to see the Heart of Thunder. Narukami told them he was too tired and needed to rest first, promising to show it to them next time. Then he directly ended the live stream. After ending the stream, Narukami walked into a tavern. Sitting across from him was Juan, who could not stop talking and had already been going on for half an hour. She was very satisfied with his performance in yesterday's stream. The viewer count had even exceeded 3,000, though he really had not noticed. After all of his attention yesterday had been on the trial, and he had no time to care about the numbers. She also noted that the timing of his sign-off had been perfect. In a way, his fatigue had actually worked in his favor. Juan looked at him with a slight blush. Every time they met, she always felt as if it were a date, especially in a tavern with this kind of atmosphere. Hawkeyes gave his conclusion. He stated that there was no need for too much explanation, and that one sentence was enough to sum it up. Even Narukami could not help growing curious about how this man was going to evaluate him in a single sentence. That he was Narukami himself. He had actually guessed it directly. Narukami glanced at Juan again, wondering if she thought the same thing. At that moment, Juan leaned a little closer and laughed softly, asking if she could ask him a question. Narukami gestured for her to go ahead. She grew shy as she spoke, acknowledging that it was strange for a manager to ask, why did he want to do live streaming, pressing him to confirm whether it was really just for money. In her impression, Narukami was not someone obsessed with money. Narukami's tone was firm. It was for money. Hearing the news about his earnings, Narukami was visibly relieved. It was a very large income. He told her that ever since they had met, one good thing after another had happened. Juan felt warmth rise in her heart, asking in disbelief whether he really thought so, and noting that this time it truly was an unexpected bonus. In the end, Narukami agreed to Juan's proposal and signed the partnership. After finishing everything, he returned home. He reflected to himself that whenever he met people offline, perhaps he did not need to wear the mask at all, and that about money, perhaps he should not emphasize it so deliberately either. But the more new relationships he built, the harder it became to control how much of his true self he needed to hide. That irritated him. And right now, the most important thing was to raise his skills further. What surprised him was that upgrading the Wedge of Greed to rank C actually cost 80,000 credits, while he only had a balance of 120,000. This cut almost reached the bone, but he still gritted his teeth and upgraded it because his collaboration with Hawkeyes would begin the day after tomorrow, and he should be able to earn a large sum. He reached his hand into the system storage. He whispered to himself that once he continued streaming, they would hear news of him again, and that he truly missed them all. On the other side, Wonjo was hugging a pillow and lying face down on her bed, her face burning red and impossible to hide. Today she had asked him in person, and he had said it clearly. Ever since they met, good things had just kept happening. That one sentence had been almost a direct hit. She could no longer control her infatuation with Narukami at all. She told herself that if she ever saw him in real life, he would only be even more dazzling. Meanwhile, on the 7th floor, Nox Bella, a fitness fanatic, had just happened to hear Hawkeye say that line that he was Narukami. The fitness fanatic turned back to the man behind him and expressed how much he hated that blonde guy, especially the way he threw things. The man behind him was taken aback. That was exactly how MN felt now. He had once heard the blue-eyed spear knight say something in battle, that the most important thing was to never let your eyes leave the target. The person behind him was shocked, asking how he could remember such a casual remark. It turned out that MN had always been absorbing everything about them, their breathing, every detail. In MN's eyes, every member of Blue Eyes was a top-tier player, but everyone had overlooked one fact. Blue Eyes was not just Narukami. Every other member was also absurdly strong, and their deaths had always been shrouded in suspicion. A man desperately wanted to know the truth from a year ago. After that, MN turned off the live stream screen. telling the person behind him not to show him that kind of thing again. The more he watched, the angrier he got, especially because of that blonde guy. But the other person said this was a direct order from the chairman. A man's heart jolted. The reason was simple. Lightning was the symbol of Blue Eyes, and Blue Eyes was the predecessor of Blue Zone, making lightning extremely important to Blue Zone. At that moment, someone pushed a cart forward. According to current intelligence, the streamer was extremely obsessed with money. The next second, that person pulled back the cart's covering. A man could hardly believe it. The cart was loaded entirely with gold. The funds were ready. The order was given. No matter what method was used, that man had to be brought back. The value of the gold before his eyes was already astonishing enough. But even more astonishing was the fact that the streamer really was as money-loving as they said. It was something completely beyond Eman's understanding. The scene shifted. The village that had been attacked by the giants had already become ruins, but everyone was busy repairing it. The giants had fallen, and though they were exhausted, at least they had kept their lives. Soon Pellas noticed Narukami walking over and was instantly overjoyed. Narukami told him his head was still spinning and that he wanted to rest a little more, but that he also had some things to ask, so the two agreed to meet at the inn. After saying that, Pellas was about to go back to continue working. Narukami smiled lightly to himself. Pellas really was a good kid. Soon Narukami arrived at the inn first. He told the live stream that they were about to see what exactly the rewards were. The first item was the Heart of Thunder, the only growth-type item, with no level requirement, granting plus 30% lightning resistance and plus 20% lightning attack. He muttered under his breath that it was way too overpowered, and that the bonuses were absurdly high. For a lightning user, these attributes were almost perfect. If used properly, it would make him even stronger. Suddenly he heard a knock at the door. Pellas had arrived, and Narukami told him to come in. The first thing that entered his sight was a basket of fruit. Narukami was puzzled as to why he had brought fruit as well. Pellas laughed loudly and asked if he had slept well. The livestream audience flooded the chat, remarking that the scene felt oddly sweet. After Pellas sat down, Narukami quietly listened to him speak. Unexpectedly, the legend Pellas had mentioned before was actually real. Pellas said that when he saw the light bloom, he knew Narukami had saved the entire village. At this moment, Narukami opened the bag on his shoulder. He told Pellas that it had dropped from the giant and handed him the Heart of Thunder to examine, asking if he knew where it came from and what exactly it was, adding that it felt very special. Pellas looked shocked. He admitted he had no clue whatsoever. Narukami was stunned, pointing out that Pellas had reacted so strongly just now and was now claiming he did not know. Pellas gave an awkward smile, apologizing and explaining that he only knew the ancient legends and was not even sure whether they were true, let alone what had happened afterward. Narukami told him it was fine and asked him to share everything he remembered. There were a total of 2 legends that Pellas knew. The first stated that lightning had once been used to kill giants, and now that had become reality, with Narukami being the one who had done it. The second stated that gods and giants had fought over lightning, going through countless battles apparently for something like the Heart of Thunder. Narukami did not understand why such a small object would cause gods and giants to go to war. Pellas told him not to be nervous and said this was practically a myth among myths that gods and giants had fought for control over thunder, and in the end the giants lost, meaning the gem had been deliberately left behind by someone. Narukami wanted to know who, but there might be no answer, as the legends did not mention it. What was clear was the reason, so that humans could use lightning, and also so that humans could stand against the giants. The people around him looked speechless. Another Narukami impersonator, someone in the live stream, donated 1,000 points and asked how the third floor felt. That question pulled Narukami's memories back a long way. If he remembered correctly, this was where he had first met her. Back then, when he first came to the third floor, a girl had spoken to him. Her name was Rina, and she used to look especially hard to approach. She had told him she had gotten separated from her companion, and asked whether he had seen someone about a certain height and build. He thought about it carefully. He really did seem to have seen someone like that, so he pointed in a direction and told her to look over there. Rina walked in the direction he pointed with a smile on her face, but the next second she froze. The second after that she froze again because there were 2 paths ahead and she had no idea which one to take. Only then did he realize that she had no sense of direction. He suggested that they go together since he was heading that way anyway. Rina was delighted, telling him he was way too nice, but now all he had left was regret. If he had not gone with her that day, maybe she would not have died. Returning to the present, he gave his answer to the live stream, saying that how he felt right now was terrible, as though he had lost something very important. The live stream was still jeering, blaming it on him having left Pellas. He pressed the button to end the stream, noting that as he was now, he should go collaborate with Mr. Hawkeyes. He arrived at a restaurant. The person he had come to meet was the chairman of the livestream guild. It was Narukami's first time meeting him. The man told him that Hawkeyes was also on the way and would arrive soon, then reached out and shook his hand. Narukami noted to himself that this was Juan's boss. The chairman remarked that it was rare for Hawkeyes to give such high praise to the same player twice, saying he was curious. Narukami paused, asking what he meant by twice. John explained. The first one went without saying. It was Narukami of Blue Eyes. Those words made his heart tighten. Hawkeyes had actually focused on him twice. This man really did have something. The chairman asked whether he had any interest in the Blue Eyes Guild, having already read the answer in Narukami's eyes. And the reason the chairman had come to see him today was to talk about exactly this. The chairman held his phone out in front of Narukami. 5 days later, the third floor would hold a championship grand prize. The moment he saw this news, a suffocating killing intent burst out from Narukami. Lightning spilled uncontrollably from his fingertips. Meanwhile, Rina discovered that Narukami's stream had actually ended. As she walked, she wondered aloud whether things were done on Shu's side. A few minutes later, Rina appeared in a forest. Strangely, the withered grassland was covered in a layer of frost and snow, and as she continued forward, the area covered kept growing larger. Rina looked towards Shu ahead, asking if he was done. Shu nodded, admitting it had ended a long time ago, but that he had been thinking about one thing, whether to let these people go or kill them. Looking around, there were more than a dozen frozen servants before them. Rina could not be bothered to deliberate and told him to just kill them, pointing out that they already knew who had sent them anyway, but Shu did not want to act directly. After all, these were more than a dozen lives. He reasoned that if they really were sent by Atsuki, he would not have sent such small fry, but that letting them go would also cause trouble. Rina let out a long sigh, demanding to know why he was hesitating so much, and pointing out that once their location was exposed, they were dead for sure. After saying that, Rina stepped forward and slowly released her power. The ice on the ground condensed into blade after blade. As her power surged, a dense mass of ice blades appeared behind her. She gave a light push with her finger, and all of them shot toward the frozen figures in front. She understood clearly, if she did not kill them, they might turn around and get her killed instead. Shu wanted to persuade her to stop and not be so impulsive, but Rina would not listen and still did things her own way, insisting that this was not something they could afford to get wrong. Soon, one ice statue after another was pierced through and shattered like clouds of dirt, leaving none alive. Shu was furious. Those bastards, he declared. He was definitely going to kill them. Shu was equally furious because that pair of shoes was their younger brother's keepsake, and now someone was using it as a gimmick. This was almost enough to conclude the message was a trap. Not a very clever one, but enough to lure them in. Rina's gaze turned savage. She concluded that Atsuki had already realized they were still alive somewhere in this world. Shu told her she absolutely had to stay steady, adding that it did not mean there was nothing they could do and that they had to get the item back. Shu was not good at covert action, but Rina was exactly suited for it. Burning with anger, Rina turned to leave, telling him he talked too much and that even without being told she would still do it. But Shu grabbed her arm, telling her to wait and clarifying that he was not telling her to charge in recklessly. They needed to make a complete plan first. The safest method was to wait until the winner was decided and then steal it. Back on Narukami's side, the chairman laughed softly, revealing that the shoes were a relic of a Blue Eyes member, and that Blue Zone was providing them as the prize for the tournament, then asked whether Narukami was interested. Narukami replied that he was, though the chill in his voice could no longer be suppressed. But the chairman was immersed in his own joy, and did not hear the coldness in it at all, expressing that he truly had not expected Narukami to be this interested, and that he looked forward to the collaboration. The chairman called after him that he would be in front of the screen every day cheering for him. But in Narukami's heart, towering rage had already surged. No one was taking those shoes away. Absolutely no one. After Narukami returned home, he began turning the tournament over in his mind again and again. What he most wanted to know was what format the championship would use. He tossed and turned, unable to sleep. If it was an individual match, he was confident he could win, but on second thought, he was in no position to pick conditions. As long as he could enter the tournament, that was enough. At that moment, there was suddenly a knock at the door. The person who came was Juan. He slowly got up, not having expected her to actually come to his home. He could not show her his real face, so his gaze fell on the mask on the table. He sighed softly, telling himself that living behind a mask was truly exhausting. As soon as the door opened, the moment she saw him, Juan's face immediately turned red. She had never expected that her sudden visit would be met by a masked Narukami again. He told her not to stand at the door and to come inside first. Juan panicked a little, asking if he really wanted her to come into his home. He pretended he was about to close the door, saying that if she preferred standing in the hallway to talk, he did not mind, so she walked in, quietly excusing herself. She said it, but she really was not disturbing anything at all. He did not even have any tea, so she could only sit properly on the chair. After looking around the room, Juan was completely stunned. The place was absurdly empty with almost no furniture. She looked back at Narukami and truly could not understand how he usually lived, and Narukami's gaze was unusually serious. Juan's magic power was indeed unfathomable. Juan told him she would send the materials from past Battle Royale tournaments to his equipment, and that he only needed to look through them once to get the general idea. When he opened his mailbox, he found it almost entirely filled with material related to Narukami. He thanked her for the hard work. Juan told him not to be polite. This was her job. At that moment, Juan suddenly became hesitant. She asked if the chairman had mentioned something to him, then revealed that they had received a message from Blue Zone. The moment he heard Blue Zone, his heart sank violently. Blue Zone was the power created by Atsuki, and the moment he thought of his enemy being over there, the fire in his heart flared up at once. Juan continued explaining that people from Blue Zone wanted to meet him, but could not contact him directly, so the message had been sent to them instead. He had not expected them to have already begun making contact proactively. Juan guessed that they wanted to negotiate terms in person, higher pay, better benefits, more resources. As she spoke, her voice became softer and softer. To reassure her, Narukami said only one sentence, to ignore them directly. Juan first looked troubled, saying she understood, then froze, asking if he really wanted to ignore Blue Zone. Narukami nodded, stating that he had no intention of joining Blue Zone, nor any other guild, and that he would stay where he was. Juan got so excited she stood up immediately, admitting she had been really afraid he would join them. After relaxing, Juan returned to her usual self, and the sense of restraint disappeared. She had struggled for a long time over whether to say it, but now she was glad she had. Then Juan got up to leave. She told him to enjoy his time well before the collaboration event started, then gently closed the door and left. The happiness she radiated made Narukami feel as if she herself had won something. He thought to himself that for an ordinary employee to be this devoted to her work, the company could not possibly be weak. Juan was definitely not ordinary. After stepping outside, Juan was so excited she could not calm down, realizing that she liked Narukami more and more. One day later, the chairman and Hawkeye stood below the grand arena, having arrived very early and simply waiting for Narukami to appear. The chairman asked Hawkeye if this was today's plan, a talent comparison test between the original Narukami and the new one. Hawkeye smiled, asking if that did not sound exciting enough, but the chairman was worried, saying that if he lost, the blow would be too great. Hawkeye did not care. He insisted that no matter the result, Narukami had to bear it if he wanted to earn the audience's trust, and looking back at the path he had taken, when had he ever fought a battle that was doomed to be lost? The chairman laughed at his arrogance, pointing out that in the end, he was still relying on Narukami. That made Hawkeye's laugh awkwardly. He admitted that was probably true. Soon Juan brought Narukami behind the two of them. Juan was clearly in a very good mood. The chairman suggested they could get familiar after the stream started, saying this was how streamers got to know each other, and telling them to continue the conversation on stream. Soon the live stream began. The instant it started, 1,300 people flooded in. Then the number kept skyrocketing, jumping from 2,800 to 4,700, and then continuing to rise at an outrageous speed, quickly breaking past 10,000. Hawkeye was a little surprised, admitting he had known the collaboration announcement was hot in the community but had not expected more than 10,000 people the moment they started. Hawkeye addressed the fans, telling them that the moment they had been waiting for had arrived, and that he had brought that person here. Narukami also entered the live stream, greeting everyone. The comments instantly flooded the screen, calling him a fake. Hawkeye played into the atmosphere, telling the fans that he had never actually seen Narukami's face, and guessing that his boss had not either, then turned to Narukami and asked if there was some secret hidden beneath the mask. The comment section instantly exploded, with viewers insisting he must be too ugly and that was why he would not show his face. Narukami looked a little uncomfortable. He insisted that was not the case and that he was actually very handsome. Hawkeye was shaken inside. This was even louder than his own streams, and the influence had truly exceeded expectations. Narukami was still greeting fans and continuously interacting, and Hawkeye noticed that his manner of speaking was steadier than expected. Beside them, Juan started acting love-struck again, murmuring to herself that her Narukami really was so gentlemanly. Soon the livestream count approached 20,000, and it was finally time to get to the main subject. A line of text appeared above Narukami's head. The trial was beginning. A spotlight shone on the center of the broadcast stage. In front of Narukami sat rows of robots. Today they were his opponents. Hawkeye explained to the audience that there were two reasons for choosing this method. First, it was extremely suitable for measuring control, and second, Narukami could use this moment to prove what he had said. There was a scoreboard on the stage, and first place belonged to Narukami from 20 years ago. Soon, a fan donated, urging him that as long as he beat them, they would give him 100 points. Narukami rolled his neck. He told them he would not take it if he were not confident, and claimed the 100 points in advance. With one horizontal slash, 4 or 5 robots fell on the spot. Their defense in front of him was almost non-existent, but the farther it went, the harder the robots became. It was nowhere near as easy as imagined. In the blink of an eye, several more robots pounced on him. He knew he could not fight them head-on, so he leaped into the air and retreated. Someone in the comments cried out that aerial combat was Narukami's signature move and could not believe someone else could do it now too. At this moment, Narukami locked onto the advanced robot below. He spun the short blade in his hand without half a second of hesitation, poured all the lightning in his body into the blade, locked onto the robot at the center and thrust through it with one strike, forcibly driving the power through its body. That blow even smashed the blue stone ground into a depression, instantly killing 26 of them. He kept tearing the robots apart like scrap metal. The comment section was flooded with shock, with viewers declaring it was too absurd and that it was as if the real one had descended. He looked up and saw that the countdown had only a few seconds left. The next moment, he charged directly at the remaining robots. Hawkeye's forehead began to sweat. Only a few seconds remained, and he questioned whether Narukami could make it. In the final seconds, Narukami took down the leader-class robot, but the battle was not over yet. He told himself that if he burst out one more time, he could kill one more. He stopped hesitating and stepped forward directly. His target was the robot leader in front. He pierced its throat with one sword. At the very last second of the countdown, time ran out. At the exact instant of the cutoff, the kill count jumped from 42 to 43. The awkward part was that his record and the record of the real Narukami were now tied for first place. At this moment, the livestream count surged to 40,000, and Hawkeye laughed loudly, marveling that he had killed that many robots and still managed to tie Narukami's score. Hawkeye smiled at the audience, declaring the test a draw, and noting that Murakami had come close to surpassing the original, adding that legend truly was legend and that it was not easy to surpass. People in the live stream began sending points to Murakami, and some sent them to Hawkeye's too, though not many. At that moment, Hawkeye's received a private message, one he simply could not refuse. The other side had directly donated 10,000 points. After seeing the sender, his whole body froze. It was Reinhardt, the strongest swordsman of the one-blade style. In the face of a figure of that level, even Hawkeye's could not help feeling nervous. But unease rose in Murakami's heart. He questioned why someone like that would watch his stream, wondering if the one-blade swordsman had already discovered that his son had died at his hands. It turned out he had overthought it. The donation was for the sake of collaboration, but Murakami did not dare collaborate. His current strength was still insufficient, and if the other party saw through his flaw, he was finished. He touched his head and looked back at Juan and the chairman. Both of them frantically signaled for him not to refuse and to agree. But Murakami turned back anyway and directly refused, stating that he had to focus on the trial and could only decline. Hawkeye's face instantly turned deathly pale, and none of his previous composure remained. Juan and the chairman wore the exact same expression. Just how bold was this guy? The livestream audience was stunned too, with question marks filling the screen. Juan and the chairman stared at him as if he were an idiot, demanding to know just how arrogant he was. Hawkeye suddenly rushed over and broke the silence, praising his outrageous performance and promising to send his share over once the earnings came in. Then he scratched his head and spoke carefully, asking now that the stream was over if he could ask a question, that he had felt something was off about Murakami's condition during the fight, and wanted to know if he had not been in his best state or had been injured. Murakami had not expected Hawkeye's to see that so accurately. He had thought he had hidden it well, but he had still been seen through. The name Hawkeye's truly had not come from nowhere. Murakami said that whether he won or lost, he would have put himself in a difficult position. Hawkeye's did not understand, pressing him to explain what he meant and what would put him in a difficult position, pointing out that the highlight of the stream was whether or not he could surpass Murakami. Murakami explained that if he had won, he really could have gained short-term hype, but that the expectations surrounding the showdown would have immediately dropped, which would actually be bad for the future. But if he had lost, everyone would only say that of course he could not beat the real Murakami, that it was normal. After hearing this, sweat appeared at Hawkeye's temple. He had not thought that far at all. Now he understood that what Murakami needed was a perfectly balanced result, which was why he had controlled the kill count so precisely. A draw was the only solution. At that moment, none of the three of them could speak. Hawkeye's was the first to recover. He concluded that, in other words, as long as Murakami had wanted to, he could have surpassed the original. Murakami gave no answer, saying he did not know either, that after all, he was not him and did not know what his limit was. He added that the answer depended on how the audience chose to interpret it, and that for him, it was enough to just keep streaming. As for the rest, someone would naturally stir up the hype for him. After saying that, he turned and left while the three of them had still not recovered from the shock. Meanwhile, on the 9th floor, a fist was raised high. The next second, that man smashed the table in front of him to pieces. Murakami had angered him so much that he was trembling. A 9th floor powerhouse had reached that level of strength, yet had been publicly rejected by a rude brat. No one could swallow that. He was Reinhardt, Guildmaster of the Golden Lion Guild. A notification on his panel showed that Hawkeye's live stream had ended. At that moment, someone walked to the doorway. Hearing the noise, the man immediately pushed the door open. Reinhardt stared at him, his eyes full of killing intent, and demanded to know if this was the Murakami he had been told about. The subordinate nodded tremblingly, explaining that he was the hottest rising star lately with extremely high popularity, though he had not expected Murakami to actually dare reject a 9th floor powerhouse. It was sheer audacity. Juan did not want to listen anymore, her finger already resting on the hang-up button. Although she had spoken stubbornly just now, she also understood that for the current Murakami, this really might be an excellent opportunity, so she still had to try one more time. Juan knocked on Murakami's door. The moment she saw him, the gloom on her face immediately disappeared and was replaced by a bright red blush, but she also felt a little disappointed. This surprise visit had still not let her see his real face. He was still wearing the mask. Murakami understood the look in her eyes and stepped forward, asking if she was curious about his real face. Juan was a little embarrassed, saying the mask really did have a mysterious charm, but that one day he would have to show his real face, just like the original Murakami had. Murakami did not quite understand. He asked why everyone was so obsessed with Murakami. Juan thought seriously for a moment and said she could think of many reasons, for example, that he had only been a lowly earthling with absurdly poor stats, and that his very existence had been harsh and cruel. But the most important reason was that Murakami had once been their hope. Murakami was even more confused, asking what she meant by hope. Juan said that when they first entered the tower there had been really nothing, only desolation stretching beyond sight, monsters everywhere, no food, no way to make money, and so-called stability was just a fantasy. The only way to survive was to keep climbing upward. The higher you climbed, the more points you got, and only when you had enough points were you qualified to breathe for a moment. Slowly, people began to believe that maybe this world could truly belong to them. At that time, the great players left them hope with only one belief, that the tower could be conquered and they could win. And standing at the peak above everyone was Murakami. In their eyes, he was like a god. His achievements were not just about clearing floors. He was the first person to prove that conquering the giant tower was truly possible. After hearing her experience, Narukami did not agree. He pointed out that if Narukami were really that strong, he would not have died on the 9th floor. He asked Juan if she thought so too, but Juan held back her answer, saying her thoughts were a secret, just like the face under his mask, and that maybe one day he would tell her. Then Narukami opened the door, wanting to let her come inside so they could talk in more detail. No matter what, if she had come here, she surely had something to discuss. Narukami had no idea what she was thinking. He only kept turning over those 2 words she had said, hope. After that, Narukami set off for the 3rd floor entrance. He told himself that he had dealt with most of the matters on the 2nd floor, and that it was time to train on the 3rd. The next moment, the system panel popped up with the 3rd floor training information. After arriving on the 3rd floor, he had to choose a faction, and he chose the Kingdom of Conrad. Only 3% of players chose this faction, and there was naturally a reason behind that. Soon he was teleported to the 3rd floor and landed in the Conrad Kingdom mercenary rest area. The moment he stepped into the rest area, a man locked onto him with his gaze and grinned, declaring that a newbie had arrived at perfect timing since he had just been bored. Pretending to be casual, he walked toward Narukami and deliberately rammed his shoulder into him, a smug smile still on his lips. But Narukami was only walking normally and knocked the other man aside directly, without even slowing his steps. He brushed past him and did not spare him an extra glance. The slick-haired man was startled and cursed, demanding to know if Narukami was blind and what was wrong with him. Narukami's gaze turned sharp as he told him that he was the one with the problem, that he had deliberately bumped into him, and that he could tell. The man flew into a rage and grabbed Narukami by the collar, calling him a bastard and demanding to know how an E-rank hunter dared talk back to a B-rank. The newcomers in the tavern saw the commotion and immediately got excited. Narukami laughed softly, remarking that B-rank was perfect and that he would test what the man was worth. As soon as the words fell, lightning flashed beneath his feet and crackled around his legs. With a single high kick, he shattered the man's front teeth on the spot. The man shot backward like an arrow launched from a bow. No one could believe it. One strike had crippled a B-rank mercenary. In the crowd, an old man had been staring at Narukami the whole time. Not long after, a group of people stormed in aggressively, declaring that he had dared bully their people and ordering the crowd to tear his mask off. More than 10 people instantly surrounded Narukami. He did not even change expression, merely sweeping them with a glance and calling them a bunch of trash. Raymond said he had never seen him before and asked what missions he had completed. The livestream fans urged him to stop chatting so much with the tower names. The goal of the 3rd floor trial was to take missions and earn 10,000 credit points. An E-rank mercenary could earn at most 50 points per mission, so most players got stuck here for more than a year. Narukami had no time to waste. He had to take a shortcut and could not spare even a second, much less slowly rank up. Raymond thought for a moment and guessed that Narukami came from Earth, noting that there were not many people from other worlds these days, but that even so he could not give him special treatment. Rules were rules. Narukami felt the rules could be shortened, but Raymond still refused, seeing no point in opening a back door for an otherworlder destined to leave. There was only one path to clear the 3rd floor in one go. Narukami told Raymond that he could help him fulfill his dream, and when Raymond did not understand, he said it more plainly, that he could make the Thunder Cavern belong to Conrad. Raymond was stunned on the spot, saying that was a mission only A-rank mercenaries could take. Before he could finish, Narukami interrupted him. He knew this was a war of pride over an unconquerable dungeon between Ottoman and Conrad. There was a special dungeon on the 3rd floor called the Thunder Cavern. History had never recorded anyone successfully clearing it, whether player, mercenary, or knight. A massive mountain range lay between Conrad and Ottoman, and the two nations had fought over it for years. Conquering the Thunder Cavern would open a shortcut through the mountains, serving not only as an ambition but also as a defensive line. Narukami told Raymond that as long as he could provide proof of A-rank status, he could clear it for him. Narukami's words made Raymond fall silent for a long time. He agreed to think about it and promised to write a recommendation letter, suggesting Narukami join the assault team since it had always been short on people. The comments kept urging Narukami to run, insisting that Raymond had no idea what he was dealing with. Narukami was only one step away from death. The assault team would depart in 3 days, and when the time came, Raymond would bring the recommendation letter. He told Narukami to wait there first. The livestream audience completely exploded, constantly sending Narukami new mission suggestions. Someone pointed out that 5 days from then just happened to be when the 3rd floor tournament ended, questioning whether Blue Zone had deliberately scheduled it this way. Raymond stepped forward, his voice growing heavy. He admitted that honestly he still could not believe anyone could clear the Thunder Cavern, that when he was young he had challenged it too, and nearly half his teammates had died that day. Narukami took the recommendation letter and said only one sentence, that it would not happen this time. Raymond thought he was crazy, pointing out that the Thunder Cavern was a team instance and demanding to know if Narukami was really saying he was going in alone, adding that he had heard Conrad had fewer people than Ottoman and could not even assemble a full team. Raymond looked a little embarrassed, admitting that was true and that they had always been short on manpower, saying he had assumed Narukami had teammates and that was why he had given him the recommendation letter. Narukami replied that he had no teammates and that he was enough on his own. On the other side, a woman was climbing a wooden staircase step by step, unable to hide her bewilderment that he was really going alone and that he was just like Narukami. But as she kept watching, she realized Narukami had already ended the stream, and she immediately felt it was a pity because from his previous streams, it seemed that every time he reached a key information point, he would cut the stream. That made Rina laugh in disbelief. She remarked that this weirdo was just like their leader, even his style and way of speaking were exactly the same, that he also walked his own path, and never cared what others thought. In her eyes, it was as if the real leader were streaming with no sense of mismatch at all. She had also heard that he was going to enter that tournament, maybe then she could find a chance to talk to him. The next second, Rina slowly crouched down. She told herself that since the stream was over, it was time to get moving. With a whoosh, her figure shot straight into the sky. Meanwhile, Narukami was dragged out shopping by Juan. It was obvious that every time Juan went shopping with him, she blushed. Her shyness was adorably obvious. Along the way, she kept praising his streams as interesting and engaging, unlike other streamers who were so monotonous. She also mentioned there was a grilled meat place on the 3rd floor that was delicious and wanted to invite him that evening, but Narukami refused. He was in a hurry to grow stronger and was in no mood for grilled meat. Besides, the tournament was about to begin. He would never hand Tino's relic over to anyone. While Narukami was thinking over the tournament, Blue Zone players appeared elsewhere. One complained that when Blue Zone called someone, they should come without hesitation, and expressed disbelief that this time the target had put on airs and made him come all the way out to meet him, unable to understand what the boss was thinking and caring so much about a minor figure from the 2nd or 3rd floor. And the person meeting with the Blue Zone member was actually the chairman of Narukami's company. 3 days later, he arrived at the Heavenly Serpent Nest dungeon, and looked up at the giant serpent resembling a coiled mountain before him. Omar Schneider, a Blue Zone player who had stayed on the 3rd floor for a full 10 years, obsessed with clearing the Thunder Cavern. It was precisely that madness that had made him famous throughout the streaming world. What shocked Juan even more was that Schneider was trying every possible way to meet Narukami, because in his eyes, Narukami's actions were almost a declaration of war. The reason they were displeased was simple. Content Narukami could clear in a few days was something their boss had struggled with for 10 years just to reach that point. At that moment, Juan had somehow climbed onto the dining table without realizing it, curious about how Narukami ate without removing his mask. After waiting a moment, Juan seemed to finally realize what she was doing, and her face instantly turned bright red. She immediately turned around and did not dare look at his face again. She warned him that between the Thunder Cavern challenge and the next trial, he was very likely to run into Schneider, and told him to be careful. The scene shifted to the 3rd floor. A carriage sped down the street, and 2 voices came from inside. One declared that they were finally going to meet that arrogant bastard who had bragged about soloing the Thunder Cavern. They all turned their eyes toward the captain. This was Schneider's team. Someone advised that Narukami just had not seen what kind of place the Thunder Cavern really was, and told the captain not to let him get to him. Schneider responded calmly, saying he was not affected, and that the guy really did have the right to brag. He took a coin from his chest. He acknowledged that Narukami's career was short, but that he had become the new Master of Thunder, and that was exactly what they had wanted for a long time. The other 2 were still unconvinced, insisting that even so, he was way too arrogant, and that just because he knew lightning arts, he thought he was the real Narukami. Schneider told them that was enough, and that it was not the time for jealousy, urging them to put their energy into improving themselves. The bald man beside him looked a little surprised, asking if the captain wanted them to respect him. The captain's hand suddenly stopped. The coin in his palm was bent into a semicircle by brute force. That scene frightened his teammates. They knew the captain was strong, but had never expected he could bend a coin. That action showed only one thing. His pride had been pierced through. Schneider's gaze was so deep it was as if he could see the future. He also wanted to know exactly how Narukami was planning to clear the Thunder Cavern. The monster there was a true nightmare. At that moment, Narukami had also returned to his rented room. He stared at the intelligence in his hand, his first reaction being that this guy had something wrong with his head. But he had to admit that the other party truly had ability. He had only begun to emerge 5 years ago and had joined Blue Zone at around the same time. Schneider of Blue Zone was a late-blooming player who had stepped into the spotlight during the Thunder Cavern Challenge. A record showed that Blue Zone challenger Schneider had ventured deep into the Thunder Cavern, only 1 step away from clearing it. Narukami had originally felt that the organizers were overly confident in holding this kind of tournament, but if they already had an internal favorite, then it made sense. Unfortunately, they might be miscalculating this time. As long as he entered, he had to take back his younger brother's relic. He would make their schemes fail and force them to pay the price. The next day, Narukami went to the largest trading market in town. This market bought anything. As long as an item was valuable enough, it could be sold for a good price. But the merchants here were all shrewd, never making losing deals, and only squeezing several times the profit out of their customers. Before long, Narukami stopped in front of a shop and handed over the Sky Serpent Fang. He did not even spare a glance at the owner's shocked expression. He only cared how much the Fang could sell for. The owner could not even be bothered with him, all his attention captured by the Fang as he held it and repeatedly examined its quality. The owner laughed wildly in his heart, thinking that this kid had come to the wrong place and picked the wrong opponent. Whether he knew the market or not, he was going to pay tuition today. The owner cleared his throat and put on a troubled look. He acknowledged that the quality was definitely top tier, somewhere between B rank and A rank, and that a hunter who could get something like this was no amateur, adding that if not for a few tiny scratches, he would have rated it S rank directly. The owner added another blow, saying that Narukami had come at a bad time since the supply of sky serpent poison fangs had suddenly increased and demand had dropped, then tapped on a calculator and announced a total of 8,000 credit points, calling it a good price. The approaching figure's eyes were filled with killing intent. If an ordinary person met that gaze, their legs would probably go weak on the spot. He asked if this was the legendary Narukami. This person was exactly the one Narukami had seen yesterday in the search device. Schneider, without question, a powerful enemy. After Narukami met Schneider, the two went to a nearby restaurant. Narukami told him to get straight to the point, saying they were not close enough to sit down and eat leisurely together. Even so, he was still a little surprised inside. Schneider had actually chosen a restaurant with this kind of style. At first, when Schneider heard that a newcomer wanted to conquer the Thunder Cavern, he had only thought the other man was an arrogant drifter. But now he dared not draw a conclusion. He was split half and half. Half of him still thought Narukami arrogant. The other half was respect. He told Narukami that he had talent, so much that it could even be called excessive, but that he still could not accept that Narukami was being compared to the original. Narukami kept his eyes fixed on him. He had assumed Schneider was just some eccentric, but he had not expected the man's gaze to be so serious it was nearly obsessive. But since Schneider had specially dragged him out to meet, it could not be just to say this much. Schneider said he had a proposal. His expression turned somewhat fierce. He told Narukami to put away his arrogance, pointing out that a few days ago he had said he would solo the Thunder Cavern. Schneider told Narukami that his declaration had been ignorance-driven arrogance, and demanded that he start a live stream and sincerely apologize to everyone. Narukami did not move. This did not sound like much of a proposal at all. Schneider clarified that he did not mean he had to apologize on stream immediately, but rather to stake it on the upcoming tournament. If he defeated Narukami, Narukami would have to go live and admit his immaturity. Narukami slowly let out a breath, thinking to himself that this guy really did have quite the temper. He then told Schneider that if he won, Schneider would have to tell him everything he knew about the spirit cave, and that since Schneider had proposed this first, that condition was not excessive. Schneider chuckled and got up to leave, saying there was no problem and that there was no way he could lose anyway, so Narukami could set whatever conditions he wanted. But over these years, Schneider had learned one thing: never speak in absolutes, so he added that at least he would not lose to him. With that, he left while Narukami remained seated without moving. He told himself that this guy really was not simple. Those 10 years had not been endured for nothing. Well, the scene shifted to the livestream guild. Juan's partner was just about to place a bet. He felt Narukami's emotions were too unstable, making him high risk, while Schneider was different, a high-return investment target that had already been proven. With this many participants already entering, the direction of the betting trend was basically obvious. Even if the odds were only 1.2, professional gamblers bet on trust, not probability. Just as he was about to place the bet, Juan's call suddenly came in. Her partner was so startled, his soul nearly flew out of him, and he directly threw his phone away. He glared irritably at the surveillance camera on the wall, accusing her of definitely spying on him and calling it too much of a coincidence that he had just been about to bet when she called. But this time Juan was truly innocent. She had just happened to call at that moment. Juan said she wanted to bet on Narukami to win. Her partner was stunned, telling her to wake up. The host announced that the prize on display was a symbol of Blue Zone's glory, that it had once belonged to a member of the Blue Eyes squad, and that whoever took first place could carry it away. That pair of shoes was Narukami's younger brother's keepsake, the only thing he had left behind. Narukami stared fixedly at the shoes, only one thought remaining in his mind. He had to take them back. What he did not know was that not far away in the audience stands, someone else was also staring at the shoes. Juan immediately felt that something was wrong. It was that cloaked woman she had seen on the street again. Her aura was too strange. Red magic power radiated from that woman's body, and her eyes held nothing but anger and killing intent. The moment the match began, Narukami started his live stream. His viewer count was absurdly high, instantly surging to 3,000 or 4,000. The comments directly flooded the screen. Even Narukami found it hard to believe, as just keeping up with the pace was already difficult. Soon he received a task. A fan promised 30,000 points if he won the championship. He gave a brief thanks. The next moment, the host gave a broad wave of her hand and a green light slowly spread out. She announced excitedly that enough had been said and that the match was beginning. A moment later, all the contestants were dropped into a forest at the same time. This was an unregulated melee. The preliminary round, death meant elimination. Aside from yourself, everyone was an enemy. There were more than 10,000 contestants in total, and in the end, only 1,000 would remain. Before long, the livestream viewer count was still climbing and donations were increasing too. Suddenly, Narukami heard a rustling movement behind him and turned around immediately. Someone was already trying to ambush him in the preliminaries, though it was not actually a deliberate ambush. The other person was just unlucky and happened to run into him. Narukami's gaze locked onto that man. Since he had been spotted, there was no chance of escape. In just a few short minutes, survivors dropped from over 10,000 to 8,000. Schneider strode through the forest, neither hiding nor attacking. In his eyes there was only one target. Suddenly his pupils contracted and his figure flickered, dodging an incoming arrow. Schneider gave a low laugh, dismissing the attacker as a small fry capable of nothing but sneak attacks. The archer cursed inwardly at having missed. The moment that thought appeared in his mind, dozens more people emerged behind him. They wanted to join forces to kill a favorite contestant. Someone warned the others to be careful, noting that Schneider had fought on battlefields for years and was definitely no soft target. Schneider sighed. He acknowledged that the plan was not bad, but said they had unfortunately picked the wrong person. The bald swordsman in front snorted coldly, taunting him for talking tough when death was at his door. The moment those words fell, his head was gone. The others did not even react in time. Their side had already lost a main fighter. Schneider's spear moved like the wind, its after images pressing down hard enough to make people unable to breathe. He told them he had seen too many people like them and that the ending was always the same: death. His gaze was cold and utterly without warmth. With a casual throw, an air current took shape in his palm and blasted forward in a straight line. With a bang, another person was shattered. Schneider advanced step by step, his voice like a sentence being passed, telling them to listen carefully, that in this tower shortcuts would not save them, and that the only thing that could protect them was strength. At that moment, Schneider was like a grim reaper returned from hell. What he held was not a scythe, yet it harvested lives just the same. Those people were trembling in terror. Narukami realized that if he did not find a way to keep finding opponents, his score would not look impressive enough. Suddenly his eyes lit up, he thought of a simple solution and slowly drew his sword. Wondering why he did not just announce that he was there and lure everyone over, then laughed at himself for only just thinking of something so simple. The livestream audience was dumbfounded, with viewers pointing out that everyone else was busy hiding while he was actually going out looking for people to kill. The next moment, Narukami slashed out with his sword, lightning wrapping around the sword force, and directly cutting the trees ahead in half. Wherever he went, he kept cutting. Just then, a man's figure appeared atop the wreckage of the fallen trees. It was Schneider, who had also just finished clearing out everyone in his area. Schneider's eyes shone with excitement as he declared that he had finally found Narukami. Narukami did not back down at all. He replied that he believed he had found Schneider first. Schneider's livestream also exploded completely. A notification appeared. Schneider was worth 10,000 credit points, as someone had earlier given Narukami a mission promising that reward if he defeated Schneider. Narukami had not expected to run into him this soon. Schneider was equally excited. From the moment he had entered the arena, he had been looking for Narukami, and now his wish was finally granted. A battle that should have appeared in the finals had erupted ahead of schedule. Schneider said calmly that there were a few minutes left, enough time for him to take Narukami down. Narukami had not fully recovered from the shock. What had just happened was definitely not a skill, but pure technique. If he lost the spearhead's trajectory for even a single instant, he would die. Schneider's seemingly casual thrust could reach distances beyond common sense. At that moment, Schneider moved, flicking his arm and attacking again. If slowed down, one could see a stream of air, but at normal speed it was nearly impossible to detect, so Narukami did not hesitate. He pushed all his attributes to the limit. He had to go all out. The moment his presence condensed, he raised his hand and blocked that spear aura, but the impact was so fierce that his entire arm went numb. Grinding his teeth, Narukami deflected the spear light away. But at that exact moment, his pupils shrank sharply. Schneider had somehow already closed the distance and was right in front of him. If that thrust landed, he would certainly die. Narukami twisted at the waist and barely dodged it. The moment the spear missed was his chance to counterattack. But what he had not expected was that Schneider's footwork spun with the momentum. Using the instant of the turn, Schneider's arm smashed down heavily once again. After that, Schneider kept cycling through the same sequence, forcing Narukami into pure passive defense until finally, at one moment, Narukami caught an opening and poured most of his strength into the cursed sword. With one slash, he forcibly drove Schneider back. Even Schneider did not dare take it head-on. Schneider retreated continuously, and at that instant, he felt as though Narukami's sword aura had doubled outright. The two widened the distance to 20 meters and stood facing each other. Schneider asked why Narukami was not using lightning, pointing out that it was his strongest trump card. Narukami replied that he was not using it because it would be a waste. After all, this duel would be over very soon. Schneider's expression darkened. He demanded to know if Narukami thought using it on him would be a waste, then realized one possibility: had Narukami been stalling for time all along? Enraged, Schneider's speed surged as he charged forward. With a harsh clang, spear and sword collided head-on, and Schneider's speed was twice what it had been before. He was nearly driven mad with anger. 2 seconds later, the pressure filling the arena suddenly vanished. The first preliminary round was over. Before leaving, Schneider sneered, warning Narukami not to get careless, and that next time he would not let him go. Narukami naturally did not buy that. He stared at Schneider and told him that sooner or later he would turn into his 10,000 points, and that he would not get away. After that, the system teleported Narukami to a studio and gave him 30 minutes of rest. At that moment, his palm was still numb. At the final critical instant, he had almost been overwhelmed by Schneider. His live stream viewer count had already surged to 11,000. For those 11,000 people, he had practically forced this hot topic into existence with his own hands. Juan had once said that once a streamer's followers broke 10,000, that was the first real barrier. Cross it once and you could establish yourself in the field. Now Narukami had firmly crossed that line under the identity of a streamer. He had drawn enormous attention, and the next real duel with Schneider would only attract even more eyes. But if even someone on Schneider's level could not clear the Thunder Cavern, then that place was probably far harder than imagined. Next, Narukami claimed all of his donations and poured all of them into upgrading the skill level of the Wedge of Greed. As long as he raised it to B rank, his combat power would undergo a qualitative leap. Meanwhile, inside the arena, the host stared at the pair of shoes with some suspicion. She had heard that thieves were eyeing them, though she did not know whether it was true, and felt that no normal person would be stupid enough to come here and steal something, and that if anyone really dared to come, it would probably only be that group. Before long, she was met by someone who absolutely should not have appeared. A man had actually come down from the 9th floor to the 3rd floor. The host froze on the spot, demanding to know why he was there. A man had appeared this time specifically because of the duel between Narukami and Schneider, and besides that he had another matter: to prevent members of the Blue Eyes squad from making a move to steal the shoes. Below him, 2 women were already on the verge of clashing. Feeling the highly oppressive magic power coming from Juan, Rina slowly took off her mask. She told Juan that being called Big Sister by her was something she was really not used to. Juan gave an awkward smile, saying that there was something absolutely extraordinary about her aura, and that she could tell she had trained for a very long time, and also used disguise magic. Juan's magic power erupted completely. She declared that she did not care about anything else, but that Narukami's stream absolutely could not be interrupted, and that if anyone dared touch it, they would die. While Narukami was resting, he suddenly received a prompt. The rest period was over, and the second round was beginning. There were many people standing in front of him, clearly all teleported over together from the resting rooms. This round's content was to seize other people's territory and make it one's own. Each piece of territory could hold at most 2 people, so while grabbing land you also had to defend your position. Defeat 1 player and you could take their territory. When time ended, the one controlling the most territory would win. Who would become the new owner of the shoes? The answer would be known in 2 hours. As the finals began, everyone tensed up and guarded their own land stubbornly. Just as Narukami had predicted, no one made the first move. Starting a fight now would gain at most 1 territory, but acting later after defeating someone could let you swallow far more land. Watching first was the normal choice. The next second, Narukami moved. 1 slash came down and directly cut off the head of the person beside him, casually seizing that territory in the process. He had originally intended to follow the usual approach too, but there was no helping it. Every person he dealt with was worth 300 credit points, and not earning that would be stupid. Schneider also began attacking the others. Anyone who had made it into the second round had fought their way out from among 10,000 people. Not a single one was weak. Yet in front of Schneider, they were still pierced through with 1 spear. Very quickly Schneider expanded and carved out a huge stretch of territory, but his gaze remained locked in Narukami's direction the whole time. Likewise, Narukami saw him too, and from Schneider's eyes he read only one word: desire. Narukami simply turned and walked away. He still had people to kill and credit points to earn. Schneider exploded in anger on the spot, demanding to know where he was going and accusing him of running away. Narukami could not be bothered to answer. 10 minutes passed in a flash, and Narukami killed another person. He noted to himself that the level of the 3rd floor was even lower than he had thought, and that the strongest one there was probably Schneider. At the same time, a system prompt sounded. A player named Dongcha had entered his territory, bringing the count to 2 players. Narukami slowly turned around, wanting to see who was bold enough to trespass on his ground. When he turned back, he found it looked like one of Schneider's people. Meanwhile, Schneider shook his head, saying he was not afraid, then asked again whether Narukami would run from this kind of attack. Schneider fell silent, gave no answer, and only calculated how to tear through the assault. This lightning truly exceeded his expectations. But this time, he had to cross that line. Time returned to before the match began, when his teammates had asked him why he was so obsessed with the Thunder Cavern. Pointing out that with his strength he could clearly have advanced to the 5th or even 6th floor, Schneider had laughed loudly, saying that people like him who became obsessed with one thing to the extreme often forgot the original reason long ago. He called it conviction if put nicely, an obsession if put bluntly, but he said there was one thing he knew for certain: if he got past this obstacle, his life would be completely rewritten, and that was why he absolutely could not give up. So at this moment he made his decision, and the spear in his hand spun with a howl. He absolutely could not run, otherwise he would be burdened with a second obsession. A moment later, his power had already been compressed to the limit. In the blink of an eye, Schneider charged at Narukami so fast he was nearly impossible to see. Narukami only stepped forward as if receiving Schneider's 10 years of persistence, declaring he would not hold back. Narukami's figure vanished from the spot as well. In Narukami's mind, Schneider was the kind of person who would walk to the end even knowing it meant death, and he respected that. The next second, their weapons collided head-on. They both unleashed all of their power at once. This was a collision of convictions, and neither would retreat. It was the karma built up over more than 10 years. The impact blasted chunks of stone from the arena and swept them up like a storm. Immediately after, a massive explosion took shape in the clash of their attacks. Meanwhile, over in the audience, Juan was still guarding against Rina beside her. Rina's eyes were cold as she told Juan that her magic was strong, but that she could not stop her from causing trouble. Juan refused to yield an inch, telling her to try, that she was Narukami's fan and would never let her ruin his duel. Just then, a huge burst of fire lit up both of their faces. The two of them stopped at the same time. The result was about to be decided. The arena was too chaotic, so Juan simply watched Narukami's livestream directly, but the livestream image made Juan's expression change instantly. That explosion had been too terrifying. The competition stage was completely swallowed by smoke and dust. Only after a long while did two figures slowly emerge on the big screen. After the intense battle, blood was spilling from the corner of Schneider's mouth. The camera moved downward. There was a huge hole blasted through Schneider's torso. He dropped heavily to his knees. Without a doubt, Narukami had won. Although Schneider had been killed, he had not truly died. They would meet again before long. The system showed that Narukami had occupied 283 territories, the most in the entire arena, so there was no suspense in this victory. At once, fireworks filled the sky and the crowd erupted. The entire venue completely boiled over, the noise surging toward the heavens. It had been many years since anyone had seen such a vicious duel. Seeing Narukami take the championship, Juan could not be bothered to keep arguing with Rina. But when she looked at Rina, she found something off about her expression. Meanwhile, someone in the crowd shouted out an offer of 3 million credit points for the shoes on the spot. Narukami turned and shouted back that he would never sell them, and that they did not understand what those shoes meant at all. But his voice was instantly drowned out by the sea of people. He could only suppress his anger and let out a sigh. Thunderclouds rolled across the sky and black lightning bolts descended one after another. With a boom, lightning blasted a huge crater into the arena. Only then did the crowd finally quiet down. Narukami made it clear that he would absolutely never sell them, not even for 100 million credit points, and that if they could not understand that, he would use lightning to make them understand. The host's hair had even been blasted into curls. She pleaded with the audience to stop forcing him to sell them. Then Narukami turned and left the venue. His objective had been achieved and there was no need to stay. The host he strode away, carrying that hard-won pair of shoes in his hand, the only relic left by his younger brother, and he had to protect it. At that moment, the streets were empty because everyone had gone to watch the competition. But there were always exceptions. 2 people were standing there. The man had just been watching Narukami's live stream and had not expected Narukami to really win. It had completely exceeded expectations. The woman beside him did not know much about Narukami and asked whether he was really that strong and whether he might become a second Narukami. The one speaking was Hanamaki of Blue Zone. Even Amon could not say for sure. It was just that recently a certain idea had become popular, that if the old Narukami could do it, then the new Narukami should be able to do it too. Only then did Amon realize Narukami had already been placed alongside the Narukami of the old era. It seemed he was the one failing to keep up. After hearing Hanamaki's explanation, Amon only found it absurd. He told her the order was reversed. It should be that if the new Narukami could do it, then the original Narukami definitely could too. Hanamaki did not hear the distinction and thought they were basically the same, but Amon knew they were very far apart. Hanamaki found it troublesome and said that was also why she disliked Blue Eyes fanatics. Amon became furious on the spot, demanding to know how she dared say something like that in front of him. Seeing this, Hanamaki immediately changed her attitude. Amon's expression darkened. He told her that no matter what happened, today's mission had to be completed, and that mission was to catch the shoe thief. Hanamaki quickly followed after him, insisting she had just been joking and asking him not to take it seriously. After they turned away, several cloaked figures silently followed after them. After Narukami got the shoes, the live stream was still on. He had not closed it. People in the live stream were betting that Narukami would definitely sell the shoes at an astronomical price. Narukami ignored them and stared at the shoes deep in thought. Though they had reunited in this way, he almost felt as if his younger brother were there beside him. Juan deliberately brushed back her hair as if showing off, congratulating him on winning the championship. She had even specially ordered him a drink, guessing he was tired and making sure it was non-alcoholic. But Narukami cut straight to the point, pressing her to explain what exactly was going on with the message she had told him about. Juan recalled what she had seen that day. She told him she had met a very strange woman in the stands who was strong, or at least that was the kind of pressure she gave. Narukami immediately pressed further, asking what this strange person had looked like. Juan said it was a woman wearing a Narukami mask over her face, that at first she had found her very suspicious and had even argued with her, but that as they talked, the woman had said she was also his fan, though the conversation had not been pleasant. She added that at the moment Narukami decided the outcome, the woman had shown a very complicated expression, like someone who had just been dumped. Juan questioned why, if she was really his fan, she would make that kind of face when he won, and noted that she had then disappeared. Juan had tried to follow her, but her ability to hide her movements was absurdly excessive, leading Juan to conclude that she was definitely not an ordinary person. Juan, after hearing all that, Narukami fell silent in thought. Someone who could evade Juan's tracking and also claim to be his fan, who could it be? He felt it was unlikely but still described the shoe's characteristics aloud, wondering if that person could be from Blue Eyes. Juan recalled carefully, saying that the person was not Blue Eyes, but that kind of reaction was hard to explain. Not a definite yes, but not a no either. Still, she had not denied it. If she absolutely had to describe it, Juan could think of only one word for that complicated expression: nostalgia. The moment he heard that word, Narukami's heart sank violently. The next second, he had already rushed out of the tavern and onto the street. He had to find that woman and ask everything clearly. Seeing him so flustered, Juan was stunned. At that moment, Rina was standing high above, looking down over the street. She had already been waiting there for a long time, simply hesitating over whether to act. In the blink of an eye, another 15 minutes passed. Narukami ran through the streets for a long time but still did not see the figure Juan had described. He realized he had been careless. Atsuki was likely using the shoes as bait to force members of the Blue Eyes squad to show themselves. Since Rina excelled at infiltration, she would definitely come back for his younger brother's shoes. She had deliberately suppressed her presence so thoroughly that no one could sense it, not even Narukami. Her concealment was terrifying. Narukami caught Shu's magic power, and afterward a figure very much like Rina appeared. He wondered to himself whether the 4 people he had saved back then were all still alive. That was not impossible, but he had to stay calm. It was still too early to draw conclusions. With Rina's personality, and with his younger brother's keepsake right before her eyes, there was no way she would just sit back and do nothing.